are predicted to face disruption.
King Charles will be presented with Scotland's crown jewels at a ceremony to mark the coronation today. The service at St Giles's Cathedral will feature a new ceremonial sword named after the late Queen Elizabeth.
The Princess of Wales met the King of Centre Court, Roger Federer, as Day 2 of Wimbledon saw Andy Murray and Cam Norrie cruise into the second round. Paul Coit is cruising here in the studio with the latest sport.
Yes, I am, and I tell you, Roger Federer actually touched her, and I'm very, very unhappy about that. Andy Murray did look terrific yesterday. He finds out who he's going to play later on this afternoon.
What time are you on at?
6:20.
6:20, and he's got footage from Australia. The Paul Coit sports slot has gone international.
It has international. Very, very excited about that. Very, very exciting.
Incredible. You stick with us, mate.
Oh, yeah.
And will it be a day of sun or a day of showers?
Yeah, we'll have the latest weather update for you.
It's been a cool and, in some places, wet start to the month, but the heat returns in some places by the end of the week. I'll have the full details in the forecast coming up.
So here we go. Today, the National Health Service celebrates its 75th birthday, and the Health Secretary has called for evolution, not revolution, when it comes to the NHS.
Well, writing in the Times today, as his predecessors called for a Royal Commission, Steve Barclay said he was committed to the model of free at the point of use.
But all of this comes as the country's three main health think tanks warn that the Health Service won't make it to its 100th birthday without support.
Well, GBNews' Deputy Political Editor Tom Harwood has been looking back at the institution's history.
I've been asked to tell you just a little about this new plan for better health. Our plan is a service which will provide the best medical advice and treatment for everyone, every man, woman and child in this country.
These were the words of Conservative Health Minister Henry Willink speaking in 1944, announcing his plans for what would become the NHS. His 1944 White Paper was the blueprint for the National Health Service.
Mr. Aneurin Bevan.
But it was Aneurin Bevan, the Labour Minister for Health, who brought the NHS into existence in July 1948. Under Bevan, the reach of the state stretched further than the original Conservative plans. Care was not only to be paid for by the taxpayer, but hospitals themselves were nationalised too. Healthcare professionals became government employees. The NHS quickly became a cherished national institution. But the course was not always smooth. Prescription charges were introduced in 1952 after the cost of the service unexpectedly began to grow. The ensuing decades saw the NHS buffeted by various political winds. The Conservative years under Thatcher and Major introduced internal markets, attempting to increase efficiency. Under Blair's Labour government, these reforms were built upon, aided by significant injections of funding into the service. The new funding smoothed the path to a drive of modernisation, patient choice and public-private partnerships. Blair's devolution agenda also saw the Scotland Act and the Government of Wales Act give devolved bodies powers to legislate on a range of issues, including health, leading to greater divergence in health policy across the UK. Yet, in the backdrop of the 2008 financial crash, the budget-balancing measures of David Cameron's coalition government led to smaller real terms increases in budgets than occurred under Labour, and a controversial reorganisation under the Health and Social Care Act of 2012, creating clinical commissioning groups and increasing competition in service provision. The past decade brought with it unprecedented challenges. The NHS's handling of the COVID-19 pandemic under Boris Johnson's government, to many displayed its resilience and adaptability. To others, it exposed shortcomings. Frontline staff faced overwhelming pressure, yet they rose to the challenge, embodying the spirit of the service envisaged 75 years ago. Today, the NHS budget has never been higher, yet waiting lists and patient care face significant strains. The cost of the service has risen by 50% in real terms when compared to 2009. As we celebrate the 75th anniversary of the NHS, the debate continues on how to sustainably fund and manage this British institution. With an ageing population, new medical innovations and a consequently ballooning budget, questions remain as to what the NHS will look like after another 75 years. Tom Harwood, GB News.
Thank you, Tom. And that gets us all thinking about, you know, if you how much you want, how much you need, how different your life would be without the NHS, but what are you prepared to pay for it?
Yeah, and your own experiences of it. And, of course, the experiences of the doctors absolutely key in all of this. We know that this month's going to see record striking from consultants for the first time as well. 7 days, I think, this month. And one of the big challenges, of course, for the NHS is doctors leaving the health service, many of whom are heading to Australia.
Well, we have a fascinating story to bring you now, a case study, as it were. Dr. Natalie McBride, who's a GP in Australia, is here to talk to us. But not always have you been a GP in Australia, Natalie. You were here. You faced that dilemma about maybe feeling undervalued or stressed out in your position in the UK. So tell us why you went to Australia, what the attraction was, and has it worked out or not? Good morning.
Good morning, Eamonn and Isabel. How are you doing?
We're okay.
No, that's correct. I started off working as a GP in the UK, and it was quite a challenge to balance my family life and my working life with the hours that are needed to put in to working as a GP in England. There's a lot of pressure with the timing of appointments. And I often felt that I couldn't give the patient as long as they needed in the appointment times, and you were under a great deal of pressure to see a number of patients in a short period of time. But obviously, coming over here, I can work less hours. The hours are more flexible, and I can spend more time with my children.
So
that's good for you, but is it good for the patient?
I feel the patient in the UK or the patient in us.
The patient in Australia.
Now. Yeah, I can give the patient much more of my time. I feel I can give much better quality care to them. I'm not rushed. I don't feel like I'm always firefighting. What's also different here is that we're able to initiate some tests and investigations, and I get to follow those up myself rather than just referring them on, particularly in cancer diagnoses. And I like the way I can follow that up, and there just seem to be less delays when you can coordinate all that care in GP.
So for you, it's been better professionally and in terms of lifestyle moving to Australia. It sounds as though it certainly has lived up to all the hype that we hear about the model for doctors down under. You're from a very much an NHS family, aren't you? I understand your sister's a consultant orthopaedic surgeon, your husband was a consultant, he's obviously come with you to Australia, your brother-in-law also, and your mum and sister NHS nurses. How do they feel about you leaving the NHS, and what are their views on the state of the NHS on its 75th birthday?
Well, they understand that as well, because they're also living that, highly pressured lifestyle, trying to coordinate dropping children off in the mornings and not returning till late at night. But I just think the doctors in the NHS are so dedicated. They're the most well-trained doctors in the world. And they're giving everything, but it's just they're under so much pressure, and they're just frustrated that they feel that they can't provide the care that sometimes the patients need. And I think that's having a big impact on doctor and patient relationships as well now in the UK. Patients are frustrated and dissatisfied, but so are doctors as well. And it's really having an effect on the doctor's mental health. And I know that burnout and stress is a big problem for my colleagues still in the UK.
Well, we're glad to hear that the things seem to have personally and professionally worked out for you. But if you were to give advice, now here we are, 75th anniversary of the NHS, and if you were to leave us with a nugget of advice to pass on to the NHS, what would it be? What do you think has to change, or what do you think could change? I mean, it seems to be, it's run like a business. The productivity's everything. Getting, you know, numbers through your office that day seems to be the big thing. Is there anything the NHS needs to learn?
Well, obviously the model can't run how it did 75 years ago. It just can't cope at the moment, but I think they need to really listen to the frontline doctors. And I think, they just need to listen to what the doctors need and they feel that they can provide that care safely for their patients. And I don't know how they're going to achieve that, but maybe even looking at models from other countries. I mean, no universal healthcare system is perfect, but I do think they need to sort of reflect on other models in other countries and how they have been successful.
Can I just ask you quickly before we let you go, how does the model work in Australia? How is it different? Because we talk a lot about, the NHS almost as a sort of sacred institution in this country. But Australia actually pays less per capita, doesn't it, for its health service, but often has better outcomes. What's been your experience in terms of the standard of care? And is it a two-tier system where the poor miss out, which is what we all, fear?
There is Medicare, which is available to all. It's a public health service here, and everyone will contribute tax in the same way they would the NHS. But in Australia, there are a lot of gap fees when you go to see the GP. There's something called bulk billing, where if you have a pension card or a healthcare card, then you will often be bulk billed and there won't be an out-of-pocket fee. But I would say most people who do not have those cards would expect to pay a gap fee to see their doctor or a gap fee to see their physiotherapist. And I think generally that leads to the patients are more invested in their healthcare and attending appointments. And obviously there are not going to be everyone who can pay to go and see the doctor, and they would have to use the public system. And unfortunately, there are longer waits on the public system than if you're going to see somebody privately. But from looking at the model in the UK, those wait times are certainly no longer.
Right.
Natalie, is there a danger that more doctors, whether junior or whether consultants, and this dispute that is going on and on and on, and there doesn't seem to be any end to it, is there a danger that more and more doctors will think like Natalie McBride and will head to Australia, or will head to Canada, or will head to South Africa?
Unfortunately so. I mean, while we all hold the NHS really dearly in our hearts, it's been fantastic for us and provided wonderful training. Ultimately, when you have your own families, you have to do what's best for them, and sometimes that's not even moving abroad, but it's even changing careers. I know there's a substantial portion of doctors who have left medicine because of the pressures and burnout.
Well, it's been fascinating talking to you, Dr. McBride. We wish you all the best with your life down under, and I have to say it's just really sad to see fantastic GPs and doctors like that leaving the NHS, but you can't blame them, can you?
No, good for her, good for her. She's got a good life, and things have turned out better family-wise for her. It's lovely to get that insight live from Perth there, Natalie McBride, who is a GP. So where does that leave? We get never-ending debates about what should happen with the junior doctors and the consultants, and it just never seems to be getting any closer near resolve.
And also just importing doctors from other countries as well. I mean, all of our doctors are going to other countries are importing doctors to us. It's this sort of exchange that's going on, and it just seems silly. Why don't we try and make it more appealing to retain our own and have our own here?
Yeah. OK, Chair of the Liaison Committee, Senior Conservative MP Sir Bernard Jenkins is facing a police probe into claims he actually attended a lockdown party for his wife's birthday in December 2020.
Yeah, the Metropolitan Police has also launched a formal investigation into a party held by the former Conservative mayoral candidate Sean Bailey's campaign team.
Well, see, and Bailey's, he's got an honour, hasn't he?
He is on Boris's honours list.
Yeah. Seems a bit strange, doesn't it? Right, more on this. Political analyst Leon Emirali now. Part of me wants to say, oh, forget it, right? Been there, done it, got the T-shirt, move on. And then part of me goes, no, it's all a bit preposterous that you get the investigators and being investigated by all of this. Let he who is without sin cast the first stone.
Yeah, I mean, look, Partygate's back. Where did it go, you could argue? And it just seems as though this is a never-ending story about more and more MPs, politicians who have been breaking the rules while the rest of us were abiding to them that they ultimately set for us.
Well, tell people why Jenkins is so important. Why does this one stick in people's craw?
Well, he's Boris Johnson's nemesis. He was on the Parliamentary Privileges Committee that ultimately led to Boris Johnson leaving Parliament. He had a number of rows with Boris Johnson. They don't get on. They aren't friends or allies. And a lot of people see this as hypocrisy because Bernard Jenkins was on that committee saying, actually, Boris Johnson, you broke the rules on your bike, when it turns out he was hosting parties
Well, it
himself.
hasn't been proven yet, has it? It's an investigation. Don't want to prejudge it, but it certainly doesn't look good. And what also doesn't look good is exactly as Eamonn said, to see a party and photographic and video evidence that we've seen in the last few weeks, the police now reopening this investigation, and Boris Johnson putting them forward for an honour, and Rishi Sunak yesterday in front of the Liaisons Committee saying, nodding it through.
Yeah, well, it's not just an honour. I mean, Sean Bailey's on course to actually sit in the Lords for life. So, this is the highest honour you could possibly get. So, yeah, I think there is, again, this sense that there's one rule for the Conservatives and another rule for everyone else. This has been seeded now for a number of years since those Partygate allegations first came out, and we're seeing it escalate. Now, the only saving grace for the Conservatives and Rishi Sunak is, are the public a bit tired of this story now? It's been rumbling on for 2.5 years, and are we ultimately looking at it and thinking, move on, draw a line under it? Or, as Eamonn says, a lot of us are still quite angry because there's sacrifices that people made during the pandemic that clearly politicians weren't.
Well, meanwhile, Rishi Sunak's approval ratings going through the floor, first time into negative territory since he became Prime Minister. What's going wrong for him?
Well, I think, Isabel, it all hinges on these 5 pledges that he made. I'm not going to reel them off, but along the lines of stopping the boats and growing the economy, ultimately, and he is failing on pretty much every metric. Now, he set those 5 pledges himself, so you'd think they'd be fairly achievable, but it seems as though inflation's remaining quite sticky. He can't seem to get a break on stopping the boats, and as we're talking about the NHS waiting list, he can't get those down either. So he is failing on his own metrics. So it's only natural that the Conservative Party membership are going to start looking at him and thinking, well, is he the guy for the job? It's crazy we're having this conversation given what has gone on previously with Boris Johnson, with Liz Truss, the mess we were in. But a lot of MPs are going to be looking at this and they might think, last chance to do something that allows us to retain our seat in the next Parliament. I think it would be unwise for them to do that. But ultimately, he isn't very popular with his party membership. So how popular can he be with the country?
Another conversation which, the more I think of it, is crazy, is the one we've just had with the doctor in Australia there, Dr. Natalie McBride, and the fact that this ongoing negotiation with doctors never seems to come to an end. And as Isabel was saying earlier, surely it's better if we can just find a way of fixing this that suits everybody. Why can't we employ doctors on the basis that they're doing, for instance, in Australia, where this woman left our NHS, she loved it, it was too much pressure, she couldn't balance her family life, her husband's a doctor as well, they go to Australia and they seem to have got it right.
Yeah, well, look, I used to work with Steve Barclay, the Health Secretary. He's a good man and he's a good politician. I disagree with him when he says that actually we need evolution, not revolution. I think the NHS needs a complete revolution. I think it is not fit for purpose 75 years on. A lot has changed over those 75 years, but ultimately the model has remained the same. And I think after the pandemic, it was an opportune moment for us to say, let's have a proper grown-up adult conversation about what healthcare looks like in this country. And it takes politicians with courage to be able to reform the NHS because it's basically religion.
Well, Leon, dare I say you sound like Tony Blair, because he's come out and said it takes...
Don't say that, Isabel.
He's come out and said it takes political courage and political bravery to tackle the issue of the NHS. And he also disagrees with Steve Barclay, but takes the view of Sajid Javid that there should be, a root and branch reform, potentially even a royal commission. Would you go that far?
Yeah, I would go that far. I do think it needs root and branch reform. I think that we need to start being a bit more innovative about the way we approach healthcare, because politicians are scared to use the privatisation word. They're scared to just bring in private providers because ultimately voters write it off and think that that's it, the NHS is gone. As long as it remains free at the point of access, that's the most important thing. Who provides that healthcare, I think, is less of a worry.
Well, the first thing I do on a Friday, Saturday and Sunday night is have breathalyzers installed in all accident and emergency departments. And anybody that comes through and fails a breathalyzer test have to deposit their credit card, and then we'll work out later whether to charge them or not.
Well, do you know, though, I've had that discussion with doctors before, and it's super controversial because a lot of healthcare issues are self-inflicted, and where do you draw the line? So alcoholism, but then you have obesity, you have lung cancer caused by smoking, whatever it might be, whatever people's vices are, I think, you know, that becomes a kind of judgment on people's behaviour.
Well, in a way, it's already happening because, you know, there is obviously extra taxes on alcohol, extra tax on tobacco products, and that ultimately pays for the NHS that people are using because they are bringing on these health issues. But I think it's about education as well, educating the public about what's good for you and what's bad for you. Last week it was Diet Coke suddenly is no longer good for you. Well, let people make decisions and give them some autonomy over their own healthcare rather than simply letting the government dictate.
Prevention rather than cure, that old-fashioned one. Leon, thank you.
Yeah, I mean, all these simple things within the NHS that they don't dish out painkillers, not to stop you being addicted to them, but because of the cost of them. Agency staff, I tell you, I've experienced a lot of healthcare in the last 2 years, and agency staff is where it falls down. They think they're saving money with this, but actually they're losing out big. They probably are saving money, but they're losing out big time in care and joined up writing with the whole thing. Leon, back with more views after 7 o'clock. Your views to Leon, gbviews@gbnews.com, or you can tweet us at GBNews as well. Get talking about this, the NHS at 75. What do you think? Would you blow out their candles or just blow out the NHS?
With the time at 6:23, let's bring you up to date with the rest of today's top stories.
Schools in England face closure today as teachers walk out again over pay and conditions as well as lessons. End-of-term events like the school trip or sports days are predicted to face disruption. Members of the National Education Union will also walk out this Friday.
The King will be presented with the Scottish Crown Jewels at a service in Edinburgh to mark the coronation today. The service at St Giles's Cathedral will also feature a new ceremonial sword named after the late Queen Elizabeth.
Wimbledon fans should expect sunnier spells and fewer showers after heavy rain on the tournament's second day yesterday. Stopped play on outside courts. Overall today we'll see scattered bouts of rain across southeast England, but it should feel slightly warmer. Right, so here we are, that lovely time of the year where the school term comes to an end and things get a bit lighter. You know, you get to that stage where they say, you can bring a video in today and you can watch a movie.
Oh, yeah, fabulous.
You don't have to dress in your uniform or whatever it happens to be. Now, in all my time at school, and all of us spent, 14 years there, I don't ever remember, I'm not saying there wasn't, but I don't ever remember teachers striking.
No, well, I don't, yeah.
No. So it's not strange.
Yeah.
How have we got to a stage where teachers feel the only recourse that is open to them is to strike for people to take notice of them? You know, the doctors are striking, the teachers are striking, the railway people are striking, we've had lawyers striking, who else have you had striking? You know, so listen, there's something wrong, and I just put it to you, all of these people cannot be in the wrong. They cannot all be unreasonable. There's something else that needs tended to.
Do you know, it'll be interesting to see the stats later on today about how many schools do actually close as a result of the strikes today, because my impression, certainly anyway, is I think this is the 5th or 6th strike day this year. Obviously, big impact on my life. And all of the previous ones, the schools have closed. Today, the school's staying open. Now, I know, for example, my son's doing his end-of-year performance, and the children would have all been so devastated if they'd had to cancel that. There is a sports day going on. I think the teachers are actually, on this particular occasion, saying, I'm not going to strike, because actually this is such a precious day and time of the year for so many of our kids, so many of them leaving, so many of them going to settling in, days at new schools. I'd be interested to see if actually it's quite a low number of teachers that strike today.
I can imagine that as well, like sports days. I agree with you, the performance day, they've prepared for all of this. And if you trained and you couldn't run your 100 metres or do your 200 metres hurdles or whatever it happened to be and miss out on that medal. That's pretty gutting.
Although producer Charlie saying he'd have given anything for Sports Day to be cancelled when he was at school. So there's always two sides to everything, isn't there?
I remember when I was younger, that you would run, you would see in cartoons that the cartoon character would run and its legs become like a wheel. And it's like your legs become faster than everything else. It's just like, I can remember running.
Were you good at Sports Day?
Fast. I was.
Yeah, I was as well.
Very thick thighs.
I've got runner's thighs, sprinter's thighs.
Yeah, very
Apparently
thick
got one
thighs.
of the other.
Yeah. So next we're going to be bringing you all the latest action from Centre Court as we go through the sport. Paul Coit.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Still to come on the programme this morning, as we mark the 75th birthday of the NHS, we're discussing if we should be talking about whether or not the health service model is actually outdated. We'll hear both sides of the argument at 7:20.
And if it is outdated, what's the alternative? 7:45, there's the King, preparing to be presented with Scotland's crown jewels in Edinburgh. We'll find out about the new ceremonial sword created for the event. It's big. It's got a big knob on the end of it, a big big jewel. Is that the right word?
I'm pretty sure jewel is a more appropriate. But
yeah, it's massive.
Yeah.
The King sort of stood over it and he looked at it and he went and didn't really touch it. Just went.
Well, it's probably advisable. Stop it.
Oh, but he did. He didn't say.
I'm not disagreeing with you.
Core blimey,
I shall
that's
look
a big
out
one.
for it today.
Yes.
But not to call it a coronation, by the way, because it seems to me like a second coronation, but it's not. We've been told very strictly by Buckingham Palace. They're Scotland's crown jewels.
Aye, whatever.
It's an official ceremony, but yeah, whatever.
So it's a coronation in Scotland. GB Views at gbnews.com, or you can tweet at GB News about anything and everything you want to talk about. Here's the exciting part of the day where we look at the back pages.
You just love it because you're best friends in the studio.
My mate.
The bromance.
My mate. Is Paul coming out to play today? Murray in a hurry. Daily Mail, as the two-time champion makes light work of fellow Brit Ryan Peniston. Express opens with "Just Right Says Fed" as Roger Federer gives Andy Murray a royal seal of approval, and he's with the Princess of Wales. "You Poke the Bear," says the Mirror. Johnny Bairstow fired up and looking for revenge against the Australians. And you were mentioning this yesterday, Paul. You think that may be, well, it has to be the only reaction, hasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. This is the way England are going to look at it and think, well, with what happened with the Johnny Bairstow stumping and the international incident that it's turned into since then, is go out there and let's just play against them and then let's try and beat them.
And I mean,
That's
getting praise in Australia itself is the forensic analysis put forward by British television, as reflected, as we're going to see now, via Australia television.
It all centres on that controversial dismissal.
Yes,
here it
there
is. Here, Johnny Bairstow being dismissed by Australia's Alex Carey. It was an incredible dismissal. It's been a big talking point all week.
Now, the question is whether the ball is dead or alive. Because if it's dead, it means he can do whatever he wants. Everybody can relax.
There used to be a pop group called Dead or Alive.
That's right. And
you spin me right round, baby. Is that how we're known?
That's
under.
Well, there's either two ways we can go. We can either be employed by Australian TV for our expert Ashes analysis, or we'll be in the next series of Australian Idol. It's one of the two.
I just think they should bring in canned laughter underneath the sports. I mean, I do my best to give.
Are you saying it wasn't real laughter, Izzy? Is that what you're saying?
I just think it really added something. If I'm honest, I really liked it.
Why would they be laughing? That's what I get.
It was funny. You were singing a silly song,
analysis.
as usual.
It was
serious analysis, is
right. Okay.
Can we talk tennis? Because you're still talking about the back pages, but almost every front page has some Wimbledon-related thing. There's Andy Murray, Nazanin Zaghari-Ratcliffe on the Times. You've got Andy Murray on the Guardian. You've got Federer and Kate on a lot of the papers, I have to say, looking very smart together.
Absolutely.
So what's going on in SW19 and what happened yesterday?
Well, Roger Federer, because last year he still hadn't actually retired, but he was injured, and then they had the Roll of Honour and everybody was there, but he had his own moment yesterday in the Royal Box. So they announced him in front of the crowd, 15,000 there at Centre Court. He walks out to this standing ovation, and everybody's... The thing is, when do you know when to stop applauding? Do you know what I mean? Because I looked at... we have a standing ovation, and then they go on, and then they go on. And because he looked, after a while, as much of a star and fantastic he is, a little embarrassed about the whole situation. It's like, OK, you can sit down now.
Paul, the only person who we know that we can ask how you deal with a standing ovation...
How do you deal with a standing ovation? Do you just lap it up for the whole time?
If it goes on too long, do you start to say, stop, stop, stop?
Please stop.
Please
Enough.
stop.
Stop. Oh, please, just a little bit more then. But did you know that the Cannes Film Festival was always where, historically, they'd have the longest standing ovation? And there was a film, and I remember hearing about this, and this is what made me think of it with Federer. I think it was in 2006. There was a standing ovation. Do you know how long the standing ovation went on for at the end of a film? 22 minutes.
Who was it for?
It was... What was it? It was a... I can't remember the name of it. It was I think it was like a science fiction film.
Right.
And the thing is...
the director or the producer?
But just for the film. They show the film, and it's known, so they would just stand like that.
Something Labyrinth. I can't...
That's it. Yeah. Pan's Labyrinth. That was it. Pan's Labyrinth.
Never heard of it.
And... It was, 22 minutes. Pan's People, we'd be familiar, but Pan's... They released a 15-minute ovation for Pan's People.
Seriously?
OK,
from Top of the Pops.
Do they have a song?
They were the girl dance group on Top of the Pops.
They would dance to the hits of the day when the artist wasn't there, and it was magnificent. But anyway, standing ovation.
One of them is married to Jesus.
Of course.
What's his name? Who plays the actor who played Jesus of Nazareth? The TV series.
Robert Powell?
Robert Powell, well done.
Well, Robert Powell got a... He was in Pan's People.
No, he's married.
He was married. Was it Babs?
Babs.
It was Babs in Pan's People.
These two, honestly. Right, I'm trying to keep these unruly schoolboys back on track.
Andy Murray. Let's talk about Andy Murray. So, did you know he's never lost in the first round of Wimbledon? But the thing is, he also... It's the first time since 2017 at Wimbledon where he's won in straight sets because, he always puts us through the ringer. Whenever there's a game on, we always say, oh, no, he's lost the first and he loses that one and then comes through. But against Ryan Peniston, came through. He will play the winner of Stefanos Tsitsipas, who's the number 5 seed from Greece.
Oh, dear.
Or Dominic Thiem from Austria, who won the US title in 2020.
Oh, right, so they'll be out in the second round then.
Well, I'm trying to think, hopefully not.
No, but
they're playing today, so if the game is tomorrow, they won't get the rest. And currently, team is 1 set up. Cameron Norrie, he's through as well. He came through in 4 sets, didn't look quite as impressive as Andy did. Dan Evans, not good. He's had a horrible run of form, and he got beaten yesterday, so he is out of Wimbledon. He's going to take some time out now.
You know, this is the time of the year I go through the back pages trying to squeeze out any football news at all.
Yes.
So Mason Mount has now done a deal with Man United. He's a United player, and he took to social media yesterday to say goodbye to Chelsea and his Chelsea fans and supporters.
Yeah, he made a little video and it went up on social media, and it's saying, well, I could just have a statement, but I thought you'd prefer something personal. Because he's been there since he was like 6 years old. So a long time, 24 years he's been at Chelsea. And so he said, it's time for me to move on to my next challenge, my career, and thank you this and thank you that. So he's off to Manchester United then for 55 million. But how the Chelsea fans are going to react when he comes back to Stamford Bridge, we'll have to see. But also Declan Rice as well. So that deal looks like that's going to be finally done over the next couple of days. £100 million.
And it's Arsenal.
From West Ham to Arsenal.
Arsenal, OK.
Plus your £5
million. Forest Green are in League Two.
Yes.
They had the ex-Everton striker Duncan Ferguson.
Big Dunk, yeah.
Big, tall lamppost of a man.
That's it.
Very, very effective. As their manager, didn't work out.
Correct.
And bit of history made.
Well, 1 win in 18, so Big Dunk has gone. And with Forest Green, you know, they're very environmentally friendly, and they're a vegan club as well. I don't know whether it was the fact that Big Dunk couldn't go with the vegan thing, it didn't work out. But they are breaking the mould. The first woman ever to manage in the Football League. Now, whether this is going to go into the Football League, her name's Hannah Dingley. She's the academy manager, so she is now coming as the interim manager. She's already taken training. They've got a friendly against Melksham Town today, so she will be taking charge of that. But whether she's actually going to be in charge in the long term, but they do break the mould for us.
Good for them.
So you say that Forest Green are a vegan team. You mean what? The players have to apply.
I think they do.
Veganism.
Whether it's like the old Paul McCartney thing and members of the band getting fired for being seen at McDonald's, it's going to be like that. I don't know. But they're a vegan club and a vegan team. So yeah.
And Leeds have appointed a new boss.
Daniel Farke, yes, German, twice promoted with Norwich.
Yeah.
Quietly speaking German, you know.
So he's been there, he knows how to get a team out of the Championship.
Exactly. But when he's been with Norwich, he's got them into the Premier League, and then it's not lasted. Okay. So anyway, the first thing is to get them up there and move them in.
First things first. Thanks, Paul.
Pleasure.
Thanks for being up there today. Lovely seeing you.
Stay with us. We're going to be discussing whether the government should drop their £11.6 billion pledge for a climate and nature fund. We'll be speaking to David Mellor and Scarlett Maguire on this big talking point next.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard. We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often there will be difficult stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Front pages on this Wednesday morning, they shape up like this.
The Times have the words of the Health Secretary as he calls for evolution, not revolution, on the NHS's 75th anniversary.
The Mail leads with Boris Johnson's Partygate accuser, Sir Bernard Jenkins, facing his own police probe over Sir Bernard Jenkins' wife's lockdown drinks.
The Express reports cheaper food is on its way as supermarkets are waging a war to drive prices down.
And in the Mirror, my friend, colleague, former colleague and TV presenter Fiona Phillips has sadly revealed that she has been diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease at the age of 62. She always did fear that because her mother had it and her father had it, she always did fear it would come after her, and sadly
So young. I texted you as soon as I saw that this morning because, you know, she's talked so much about it, as you say, and I think even her uncle or someone, I mean, her family's been ravaged by the disease, but she always thought she could hopefully get to 80 or something. But 62 is no age at all. But the good news is apparently she's involved in one of these new trials.
Tests, yeah.
And there have been so many developments around Alzheimer's. Fingers crossed for her, and obviously we send her
that
our very best.
Is in sight, or prevention is in sight somewhere along the line. Let's go through the papers. We've got Scarlett Maguire, former Labour Party advisor, and David Miller, former chief executive to the Treasury, which is why he's kicking off with a Daily Telegraph story about inflation within the UK. Tell us more, David.
Well, it's only online at the moment, but the suggestion is that we are the only country in the G7 where inflation is still going up. And when you widen it to the OECD membership, you find of 38 countries, only 3 countries have rising inflation, and, would you believe, we are one of them. And this is where, you know, remember the Tories, we've always said about the Conservative Party, they're not likeable, but at least they know how to run the economy. Well, who says?
Well, it's very difficult to keep up with this because it feels like the metrics change all the time. Certainly the OECD really clobber us all the time with horrible sort of analysis of our economy, and then they revise it. So just explain to us, you know, on what basis is the UK, do you think, doing worse than all of the other G7 economies? What's the reason for it? Because we've heard so much from Rishi Sunak talking about these external factors, but can we still blame those anymore?
I don't know that one can, or rather, you can, but whether it will be successful, I think half the problem is things like, for instance, the price of food, which has gone up and dramatically, and which has caused a whole lot of problems. And I actually think that the government doesn't appear to be in control of the way that the economy is developing. And you see, would that be a surprise? I mean, I have nothing against Rishi Sunak, except that he's very inexperienced. I have nothing against the Chancellor of the Exchequer. He's a very gifted politician, but he's never spent 10 seconds in the Treasury as a minister or an advisor until he became Chancellor. It is a bit like playing golf with people who've only just come off the sort of training range.
But in defence of Jeremy Hunt, I mean, he's an extremely wealthy man in his own right before he went into politics. He was a successful businessman, made his own business. I think it was in tutoring or something, and exported his business around the world. So he does know a thing or two about, you know, balance sheets.
No, I thought he was a very good Health Secretary. I'm simply making the point that it was never intended that he would become Chancellor. He became Chancellor by default. And I think there is a worry here, and that is that the ministers, neither the Prime Minister nor the Chancellor, are able really, it seems to me, to get a grip of what is happening. They depend on their advisors, and, well, you know, advisors do their best, but it's not the same as having proper political
Somebody
grip.
may be advising them to save £11.6 billion on the budget by doing what, Scarlett?
Because, I mean, this is amazing that they're going to drop their pledge for the climate fund because they say it's too expensive. And I remember Kemi Badenoch, when she was trying to be leader of the Conservative Party, saying, we can't afford net zero. And you think, hold on, this could be the end of the world. What do you mean we can't afford it? I mean, either we are in a climate change crisis, which we do appear to be. June was the hottest month ever. We've had the hottest June ever. All around the world, we've got problems. We need to do something to get to get the rising temperatures down. And now we've said, well, we can't really afford it. And then, because it's The Guardian, somebody said to them, well, if we do this, we won't be able to spend our money on sort of humanitarian aid and girls. I mean, the climate change money should be proper. We've already had Zach Goldsmith resigning over it.
Although, question mark over whether that was over the lack of green credentials in government, or actually if that was just a blow because he was upset about everything that's been happening surrounding his allies and Boris Johnson and all of that.
Absolutely, but I do think, I mean, it was interesting that he chose that. And what he said was, you know, it's not that you're against it, it's that you don't really care. And that's the problem with Rishi Sunak, I mean, it goes back to what David was saying, is he's such an inexperienced politician that actually he doesn't know how to run a government, how to do...
But he might exactly know how to run a government if inflation's out of control and debt is at an all-time high. Why is he spending £11.6 billion on green issues for? I mean, there's an immediate saving, short term.
Well, it's pretty short term, isn't it? I mean, how much is it going to cost us as the temperature goes up, you know, the sea level, the temperature of the sea is incredibly high at the moment. I mean, if you look at the metrics around what's going on, you can't say that there isn't going to be a climate crisis.
Okay.
I mean, it is really, really important. But I mean, it's just one of the many ways in which we are being let down.
But Scarlett, it doesn't matter what we do. We're a small little part of the world. What matters is to try and get collective action, which we have participated in. But the idea that anything we do is going to make tuppence halfpenny worth of difference, it isn't.
But isn't this a global fund that they were committed to? This was,
absolutely right, Isabel. I mean, what I was going to say is this is about collective action, and the problem is if you make a pledge and you have the COP at Glasgow and you say this is what we're going to do. I mean, as Boris did, and then of course took a private plane back, but he pledged it as part of a global thing, and now we're saying we won't do it. It's not a private...
If you were in the Treasury, would you be saying don't do it?
I would.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, we've got to keep expenditure under control. And I don't believe that money, for the most part, is going to do any good at all.
OK,
I think
viewers,
it's rhetorical.
Listeners, what do you think? GBviews at gbnews.com. Let us know. Plans for the police, David, in the Times, talking about Home Office plans to overhaul the scourge of rogue police.
Yeah, what that reveals is there are probably a couple of thousand police officers who have been deemed not to be properly employed as members of the police service, but they stay there because there is a peculiarity. In most businesses, companies, you're allowed to decide who you employ and who you don't employ, and then, of course, if you get it wrong, the courts can put you right. Here it appears that chief constables are trying to get rid of officers who have behaved badly, but within their own internal structure, there is an external appeal procedure, which means a lot of officers who are deemed not to be proper people to be police officers are retained on the books. And what the idea is, well, overhaul to tackle the scourge of rogue police. At least 2,000 police officers, says David Wood, the crime correspondent, are to face losing their jobs under government plans. Ministers will make it easier to dismiss failing or disgraced officers. What's taken them so long, you know?
Okay. It is incredible. It is absolutely incredible. David and I go on here time after time talking about it, particularly the Metropolitan Police and the corruption within it, and you can't get rid of the officers.
OK. Guys, for the moment, thank you very much indeed. Scarlett and David will be back in 40 minutes' time.
Now, a decision on whether the grave of the famous Dam Busters dog can be removed from RAF Scampton is expected later today.
The dog served as the mascot for the legendary RAF squadron, the Dam Busters, and was buried on the former airbase at the request of his owner. And it had such a name that we can't mention.
Yes, it was
yes, politically
racially
incorrect and wrong in this day and age. So the Home Office's plans to convert the base into a migrant camp.
And our East Midlands reporter, Will Hollis, has been looking into it.
If the courage of the Dam Busters men is the heart of their story, then their mascot dog is the soul. From flying with Wing Commander Guy Gibson to drinking beer with the men of 617 Squadron, the Black Labrador is synonymous with the Second World War raid. Now, 80 years on from his death, he's at the centre of a British controversy. With Scampton Air Base shut and asylum seekers incoming, the RAF says it can no longer protect the grave and its heritage. They want to dig up and remove any remains to RAF Marham in Norfolk, the current home of 617. Locals are furious. Sarah and Paul live next to RAF Scampton.
I mean, you don't live here without becoming attached to the history of the base, do you? So, you know, knowing that part of that's gone, and a huge part of that has gone, would be quite upsetting.
He lived here, he died here, his grave's here. This is where he belongs.
For the people living here in Scampton, Guy Gibson's dog isn't just a part of the Dam Busters story, it's also a part of their story, and they feel that it's their job to preserve it in the same way that the RAF says that it does. Parts of the historic base have listed status, which covers the dog's grave. Any change to a protected building and its surroundings must go through the local council, in this case West Lindsey in Lincolnshire.
This is Hangar 1. Hangar 2 is the next one along, and at the front of Hangar 2 is where Guy Gibson's dog's buried.
Councillors like Roger are battling the Home Office to try and scrap a plan to put asylum seekers at the former base. He says if it happens, they can kiss goodbye to a £300 million heritage deal for Scampton.
The dog's grave is part of our heritage, but it's also part of our future, because the future here, if we get what we want with the £300 million deal, involves a world-class heritage centre, and the dog's grave is part of the story of 617 Squadron.
Hundreds of people have given feedback on the planning application. Historic England recommends refusing, as it would harm the significance of the wider site. Gibson's dog died when it was hit by a car just hours before the raid. The wing commander then hid the death from his men, fearing it could be seen as a bad omen. Buried overnight, he's been resting there ever since. The decision on removing him is expected tonight at a planning meeting badged as extraordinary. Will Hollis, GB News in Scampton.
Scampton is in Lincolnshire. What do you think about that whole story there? Should the dog's grave be protected, be saved? Should it be allowed to be transferred elsewhere if the base is turned into a migrant camp? Should the base be turned into a migrant camp? Your views very, very welcome.
Speaking of views, lots of people getting in touch on the NHS today. We were talking to a GP down in Perth in Australia, and Stephen's making the point Australia has a population a third of the size of the UK. There's bound to be less pressure. The problem with the UK is that we're overpopulated. Liz says, the last few years my husband's health's not been good. What I see is that the NHS is a bureaucratic nightmare. I feel the money is there. However, I have seen that the right hand doesn't know what the left hand is doing. Perhaps what could help is that all doctors work full-time for a couple of years to clear the backlog. John says, morning both. We have crumbling hospitals. The population's exploded. We had a pandemic. Lots of doctors and nurses caught COVID and have now left the NHS. It doesn't matter what party you vote for. We need a major reform. We also want to hear your really positive stories about why you think you've had great experiences on the NHS, because, of course, it is the birthday of the NHS as well, so we want to shine a light on that. And we'll be speaking to some case studies
especially
on that theme a little bit later on.
When it comes to emergencies, when there's an emergency
Absolutely.
and you've got to use
Yeah.
the NHS, I mean, that is incredible. So I got up this morning and I went out to the car and it was wet everywhere. It had rained overnight.
Wonderful.
Yes, you like a bit of freshness.
Well, it's good for the garden.
Yes, well, let's find out
It's
what's
good for
going to happen
Wimbledon.
for the rest of the day. Hello, Aidan McGivern.
Hello, very good morning to you. It's Aidan McGivern here from the Met Office with the GB News forecast for Wednesday. A bright start for many of us, but cloud is already building, especially towards the north and the west, and we'll see a scattering showers by the afternoon. However, the wet weather that many southern parts of the UK experienced yesterday, that's well on its way into the Low Countries, along with a strengthening wind. Gales could cause disruption for the Netherlands and Germany during the day. But across the UK, actually, the weather settles down as that system clears through. There'll be a lot of cloud, but some glimmers of sunlight coming through at times. And there'll also be a scattering of showers. These will be hit and miss. Some places will avoid them and stay dry. But where the showers do occur, they could be quite heavy. Otherwise, where we avoid the showers, temperatures comfortably reaching 22 or 23 Celsius in the south and southeast, 17 to 19 across Scotland, Northern Ireland and Northern England, which actually is about bang on average for the time of year. Then into the evening, we're going to see the showers fade away in most places, but not everywhere. There will still be some showers across western Scotland, 1 or 2 for Northern Ireland and North Wales, for example. Best chance of dry and clear weather towards the southeast. However, most places will keep temperatures in the double figures, 11 to 14 Celsius as we begin Thursday. Thursday starts off with some sunshine. Eastern Scotland, for example, the Northern Isles, the Midlands, East Anglia and the south seeing some decent blue skies first thing. The cloud will develop, though, and by lunchtime I think it is mostly cloudy out there. That cloud giving a few showers once again for Scotland, Northern England and North Wales. But Northern Ireland turns wetter by the afternoon with some strengthening winds from the south. 18 Celsius here, 21 or 22 Celsius towards the southeast. That wetter and windier weather pushes into Scotland on Friday, turns more showery, whilst England and Wales turn drier, sunnier and warmer, with temperatures approaching 30 Celsius by the start of the weekend in the southeast.
Thanks, Aidan. Thank you very much indeed. And please do stay with us because we say happy birthday. NHS 75 today.
And the Health Secretary's calling for evolution, not revolution. We'll have the details in a minute.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things. We've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Weeknights on GB News from 6 p.m. You'll always get drama.
Please stop, Michelle.
I know, yeah.
Please stop.
Should I just shut up?
Romance.
You like me, I like you. There you go.
There you are. Well, don't tell anybody.
Adventure.
Etc.
That's the whole point. But boom.
And action.
Sergeant, read my superstar panel. They're already at it. They're fighting. It's going to be quite a show.
Only on GB News. Britain's watching.
The Health Secretary rejects overhaul of the NHS on its 75th anniversary as he expects experts warn it is in a critical condition.
Hello there, very good to see you. It is 7 o'clock on this Wednesday, the 5th of July. You are tuned in to breakfast here on GB News with Eamonn and Isabel.
Here's what's leading the news this morning. Evolution, not revolution. That's the message from the Health Secretary as the NHS turns 75 today. But it comes as the country's three main health think tanks warn that without investment, it won't reach its 100th anniversary. We'll be live at Britain's oldest hospital in just a few moments.
Boris Johnson's Partygate investigator, the Conservative MP Sir Bernard Jenkins, is facing a police probe and claims he broke lockdown rules. Scotland Yard is looking into a birthday drinks held for Mr Jenkins's wife, Baroness Jenkins, in Parliament in December 2020.
Schools in England face closure today as teachers walk out over pay and conditions, as well as lessons. End-of-term events like school trips, plays and sports days are predicted to face widespread disruption.
King Charles will be presented with Scotland's crown jewels at a ceremony to mark his coronation today in Edinburgh. The service at St Giles Cathedral will feature a new ceremonial sword named after the late Queen Elizabeth II.
And it was a mixed bag in terms of weather yesterday. Will it be a day of sun or showers today? We'll have your latest weather update.
It's been a cool and in some places wet start to the month, but the heat returns in some places by the end of the week. I'll have the full details in the forecast coming up.
Top story this morning is the Health Secretary has called for evolution, not revolution, when it comes to the NHS, as it celebrates 75 years today.
Well, writing in the Times newspaper, the Health Secretary, Steve Barclay, heralded the NHS as a source of national pride and said he was still committed to the model of free at the point of use.
But it comes as the country's three main health think tanks warn that the NHS will not make it to its 100th birthday without support. And just one day after Sajid Javid's call for a royal commission.
Well, GB News' Deputy Political Editor Tom Harwood has been looking back at the institution's history.
I've been asked to tell you just a little about this new plan for better health. Our plan is a service which will provide the best medical advice and treatment for everyone, every man, woman and child in this country.
These were the words of Conservative Health Minister Henry Willink speaking in 1944, announcing his plans for what would become the NHS. His 1944 White Paper was the blueprint for the National Health Service.
Mr. Aneurin Bevan.
But it was Aneurin Bevan, the Labour Minister for Health, who brought the NHS into existence in July 1948. Under Bevan, the reach of the state stretched further than the original Conservative plans. Care was not only to be paid for by the taxpayer, but hospitals themselves were nationalised too. Healthcare professionals became government employees. The NHS quickly became a cherished national institution. But the course was not always smooth. Prescription charges were introduced in 1952 after the cost of the service unexpectedly began to grow. The ensuing decades saw the NHS buffeted by various political winds. The Conservative years under Thatcher and Major introduced internal markets, attempting to increase efficiency. Under Blair's Labour government, these reforms were built upon, aided by significant injections of funding into the service. The new funding smoothed the path to a drive of modernisation, patient choice and public-private partnerships. Blair's devolution agenda also saw the Scotland Act and the Government of Wales Act give devolved bodies powers to legislate on a range of issues, including health. leading to greater divergence in health policy across the UK. Yet, in the backdrop of the 2008 financial crash, the budget-balancing measures of David Cameron's coalition government led to smaller real terms increases in budgets than occurred under Labour, and a controversial reorganisation under the Health and Social Care Act of 2012, creating clinical commissioning groups and increasing competition in service provision. The past decade brought with it unprecedented challenges. The NHS's handling of the COVID-19 pandemic under Boris Johnson's government, to many displayed its resilience and adaptability. To others, it exposed shortcomings. Frontline staff faced overwhelming pressure, yet they rose to the challenge, embodying the spirit of the service envisaged 75 years ago. Today, the NHS budget has never been higher, yet waiting lists and patient care face significant strains. The cost of the service has risen by 50% in real terms when compared to 2009. As we celebrate the 75th anniversary of the NHS, the debate continues on how to sustainably fund and manage this British institution. With an ageing population, new medical innovations and a consequently ballooning budget, questions remain as to what the NHS will look like after another 75 years.
And Tom joins us this morning from the country's oldest hospital, where presumably celebrations as well as a bit of reflection about where exactly the NHS is headed with more strikes scheduled for this month.
Certainly mixed feelings, of course, for NHS staff, some of whom who have accepted new pay bargains, other, of course, who are holding out for further strikes and really quite extreme pay rises, some would describe. But this is the country's oldest hospital. It was founded in 1123, almost 1,000 years ago. But it was 75 years ago today that it was nationalised and became part of the National Health Service. And since that point, all of its employees, or at least most of them, became government employees. The role of health in the country took on a much more political bent, and that's what's been the crux of so much political discussion in the last 12 months, particularly as this service sort of creaks and ails in the wake of COVID and those long, long waiting lists. We, of course, remember the Prime Minister's fourth of 5 pledges is to cut those waiting lists that continue, as things stand, to rise.
Though, Tom, I don't know what you think, but as though for the first time, really, there is an appetite for serious discussion about the future of it. I mean, just yesterday, former Health Secretary Sajid Javid calling for a Royal Commission. Today, we've got Tony Blair coming out saying it takes brave political leadership to tackle the problems of the health service.
Yeah, but nobody in government is saying these things.
But the only comment coming from Steve Barclay is evolution, not revolution. And, you know, questions about whether that's enough.
Isn't it interesting? All of these people who have been in positions of government only say that they'd like to reform it after they've left government. It has for so long been seen as something almost untouchable in British politics, and people hold the NHS so close to their hearts. Everyone's got a story about how themselves or a family member have used NHS services and the provision within it. But it's interesting listening to Sajid Javid's call specifically for this Royal Commission to compare the NHS to some other universal health systems around the world. Of course, the NHS was not unique, but it was relatively rare when it was introduced to deliver that cradle-to-grave, universal, taxpayer-funded healthcare. Of course, Germany had had that in some form for some decades before, but other countries were still not quite there. But by the time we get to the 21st century, most developed countries in the world have universal healthcare, and some have different ways of delivering that universal healthcare. And that's what Sajid Javid has been sort of calling to look at, although it doesn't look like the government wants to open any sort of accusations of another top-down reorganisation of the NHS anytime soon.
Thanks, Tom. Thank you very much. Right, here's how I see it. A lot of other countries have universal health care, but who, with the size of the population comparable to ours, does it better than the NHS?
Well, I was doing some number crunching yesterday. Apparently, we spend the 6th highest amount in the world, equivalent to Switzerland. And apparently, Switzerland is viewed as the kind of gold-plated country in terms of funding and outcomes. And yet, countries who spend a significant amount less than us per capita as a proportion of GDP are places like Denmark, Belgium, Australia, and New Zealand and Korea, and they all have better outcomes. I don't think it's necessarily a question of funding, and we are going to debate this at 7:20. I think there's enough money going in. It's about the allocation of those funds and whether the structure of the NHS works as a model. And I do certainly think that we have to start talking about penalising people who abuse the system. So if you don't turn up for your GP appointment, pay a fee.
Yeah, people who take it for granted. I think very few people will complain about the actual care they get. What they will complain about is how long they have to wait for that care. And the worst area, I think, for waiting is, I mean, OK, you can have all your big diseases, your cancers and all that sort of thing. But accident and emergency, it never ceases to amaze me when you need medical care most urgently, when you've broken something or been in an accident, whatever, you may have to wait 3-4 hours for someone to come and see you. And that's, I think, is wrong. I think that there should be more emphasis put in to accident emergency. But then, of course, accident emergency are overrun because GPs are underfunded and people can't get to see their GPs, so they turn up at accident and emergency. So, as you were saying, it's the system, the management of the system, perhaps, as well. Let's get Leon Emirali's view of that, political analyst. What do you think, Leon?
Yeah, well, I agree with you. And I think in terms of international comparisons, Japan is also a country that has got, I think, 10 times more beds per 10 people, per head, essentially, yeah. So, you know, there are countries out there that are doing it better and potentially spending less than us. And I think we need to have that whole-scale reform of the NHS, because ultimately it isn't going to change. We've got an opportune moment now after the pandemic where we have to say it has changed the provision of healthcare in this country for the worse. I think we've seen that waiting lists have got higher. It's harder to get a GP appointment after the pandemic. So let's change that. Let's make that change.
But, Leon, you say it's an opportune moment, but it's in the hands of politicians, and the politicians are busy thinking about re-election, trying to sort out mortgage rates, trying to sort out the cost of living, all of that. And the question has to be whether or not the NHS and the future of it and the running of it should really be in the hands of short-term politicians who are just thinking about the next election.
Yeah, and all they do is chuck money at it, and it's just becoming this money pit without any real sort of thought towards where that money goes and how we can improve efficiency. But I see the NHS a little bit like a bellwether public service. If the NHS isn't working, you can be sure as hell that a lot of other public services also aren't working. And I think this is the issue. It points to a wider issue about the UK's state of our public services, and, you know, the NHS clearly has got some problems.
And a final thought on the NHS from you before we talk about other things. You worked with Steve Barclay, you were one of his special advisors. You don't actually agree with his evolution, not revolution line on the NHS today?
No, I think we need a revolution. I really do. And I think actually what Steve has been saying over the past year or so when he's been in post is to use technology as a way of being able to clear the backlog, to be able to be innovative in the way in which we deploy healthcare. And I think that we need to go down that route and actually embrace technologies that we have. We can use AI to triage. So as when Eamonn says, when people turn up at A&E, they can get the care they need based on prioritisation. We can use technologies to help us do that, and I think that's what's needed.
Yeah, you see, I think that you can look at other systems and see how badly run they are, like the Houses of Parliament, and they're then responsible for running the NHS, more or less. And you had the deputy leader of the SNP in Parliament, Mary, what's her name?
Mary Black.
Yes, basically saying, I've had enough of this, I'm not standing again, this place is absolutely hideous. So then we get inside there and we see how it's run. 2 more Partygate investigations have been announced. How significant are these?
Well, they are significant. One in particular, very significant. Sir Bernard Jenkin, who's a Conservative MP, Boris Johnson's nemesis. He was on the Privileges Committee that ultimately led to Boris Johnson resigning as a Member of Parliament, found that he did mislead the Parliament over the parties that he held. Now, The story is, allegedly, that Bernard Jenkin was hosting a party for his wife, Baroness Jenkin, during the time when restrictions were in place. So if that's the case, well, that's very hypocritical, because Bernard Jenkin is obviously has to lead by example, given that he's on this Privileges Committee. So that's significant. The second story is around Sean Bailey, former London mayoral candidate for the Conservatives. His, I think they called it Mingle and Jingle Party in CCHQ, Conservative Campaign Headquarters. That's been referred to the Met Police as well. So it's just a never-ending stream of these parties being held in Westminster.
Never-ending party that keeps on giving.
Indeed.
All right, Leon, thank you very much indeed for coming in.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good to see you, Leon. Let's bring you up to date with the rest of today's top stories with the time at 7:15.
Schools in England face closure today as teachers walk out again over paying conditions, as well as lessons, end-of-term events like school trips and sports days are predicted to face disruption. Members of the National Education Union will also be walking out on Friday.
Artificial intelligence has the potential to boost Britain's economy by £400 billion, according to a report by Google. Well, they would say that, wouldn't they? The tech giant insisted that whilst jobs will be lost to AI, that will be outweighed by the economic benefits. However, it also called for a greater regulation of the technology.
Tennis fans should expect sunnier spells and fewer showers after heavy rain on Wimbledon's second day stopped play on outside courts yesterday. Overall today we'll see scattered bouts of rain across southeast England, but it should feel slightly warmer for many.
Avril says, my daughter never wanted to be anything else but a teacher. So we were talking about, I can't remember teacher strikes. I'm sure there were when I was at school. Isabel, different generation, can't remember teacher strikes when she had her 14 years at school as well. So Avril's daughter just loved being a teacher. She taught for over 20 years until a year ago when she almost had a breakdown. She still loved teaching, but she worked every evening and weekend on admin, charts, and unbelievably making scrapbooks for every child for every subject. And people still think it's a 9 to 4 job. Well, I'd have said, some kid had said to me, Mr. Holmes, would you do a scrapbook for me? I say, sling your hook.
Yeah,
you see, you need a bit of tough talk, these kids nowadays. Oh, I'll do your scrapbook for you. Yes, I'll do that.
I wish they would at my kids' school.
Do that. Do you know what I can't understand? Papier-mâché, right?
Yeah.
And cornflakes boxes.
Yeah, I had to make an Arctic base the other day.
Why?
Do you remember?
You see, this is it. And it was a Sunday night, wasn't it?
My 5-year-old can't make an Arctic base. I made an Arctic base.
Why does your 5-year-old need to make an Arctic base?
Because they've been learning about the Arctic. It was a fun activity. We sat down together.
Well, it wasn't fun. It was a Sunday night.
I mean, I hated
pressure.
it, but she quite enjoyed it. Actually, she was really fussy. I did the same homework for my son when he was in reception, and he got really into it. My daughter said, I don't like your polar bear, Mummy. It doesn't look like a polar bear. Make it yourself, then.
Yes.
You know?
You're lucky you're getting a blooming polar bear, would be my attitude to that. But, I mean, see, I think that is useless, senseless, wasteless. It wastes everybody's time.
But do you know
it creates
what?
Rubbish. What?
Do you know what? Some parents ask for more homework. Every week we get our homework for our 5-year-old, and in it says, for those of you who want extra.
What
there are parents who really
what sort
want
of
extra
sicko
homework.
asks for?
Because they're pushy parents, aren't they? And
Have they got nothing to do?
No, they've all got
Do you know what
proper
I
jobs.
watched last night? I stayed up to 10:30 last
Yeah.
night. You know, I phoned you earlier, I was going to bed early.
No, I
didn't. I lied.
Of course you didn't.
I lied. Somebody phoned me. There's every week on what channel? There's so many channels.
Don't need to know.
Oh,
just tell me the story.
It's ridiculous. What channel
don't need
was
to
it?
know the channel.
Was it Disney? I'm not sure.
Anyway.
So there's this Idris Elba series called Hijack.
Oh, right.
And they release one episode a week.
Apple TV, I'm being reliably informed.
Apple TV. See, there's so many I don't even know. And but anyway, you're glued to it. So I got my episode come out at 9:30 last night, so I stayed up to 10:30 to watch it. It's about a hijack on a plane. I always think...
You love hijacks on planes.
I'd be a
like
good
your
person.
favourite.
I would be a
you?
good person, yeah, I'd be there. I'd be the one to say, look at that old grump in the corner. You don't worry about him. But I'd get them all.
Yeah?
I'd get them all. I could tell what's going on. But it's very, very good.
Yeah.
So if you're not
I wonder how many
that,
women watch that. It's such a male thing. It really
Why?
is.
What, you think hijack's
I'd
just...
love to watch a hijack show, and I imagine how many... I could be so good at that. You sound like my husband. He's exactly the same. So I'd be really good at saving the day. I could be the hero. It's what you boys all do.
Would you stay up to 10:30?
No.
No. I was going to phone you until you never guess what happened.
Voice note. I always say voice note me.
No.
Anyway, we are chatting. We're waffling.
Arctic base. A lot of nonsense.
Tell us the homework projects that you remember for all the wrong reasons.
Well, do you know how many homework, what are they called, tasks like that I got when I was at school? None.
Really?
None.
Yeah.
I remember lying to my teacher once that you had to back your books.
Yeah.
Did you ever
mark them yourself?
No. You had to put paper on your books.
Oh, right,
like brown paper or wallpaper or something for some stupid reason.
To protect them because they got passed from pupil to pupil.
And I remember coming in, and so if you didn't do it, you got slapped, right? So I suddenly go, why did I not know about this? So I hadn't got any books, and the teacher said to me, Holmes, why haven't you backed your book overnight? And I said, sir, because I had this knife in my hand and it fell on the book and it sliced the whole cover off.
Lied to a priest?
No, it wasn't a priest, but it doesn't matter, I still lied. But the point is, I thought, well, it's the most ridiculous. How could that happen? Drop the knife and it rips it open and whatever it is. But anyway, he said, that's OK. He accepted that.
Oh, that's good.
It shows that lying
gets you everywhere.
Gets you everywhere.
That is not what we should be teaching our children, FYI. Next, as the Health Secretary calls for evolution, not revolution in the NHS, we discuss whether the health service is outdated in terms of funding.
First and foremost, I'm a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamonn.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us. From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamonn and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com. You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's 7:24. Still to come on the programme this morning at 7:45.
The King, right? All hail the King as he prepares to be presented with another set of crown jewels. These ones belong in Scotland, and we're going to find out about his new big whopper, his ceremonial sword. It is a big whopper. It's bigger than the one.
About the King, Eamonn.
Well, it's the bigger one he had.
Okay.
It's bigger than the one he had in Westminster Abbey.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's got
How many big swords does one king need?
It's got a big jewel in the handle of it as well. But you see, the thing is, he doesn't actually lift it.
Oh.
Why wouldn't
the King, exactly.
Yeah.
It's been named in honour of his late mother, which is a lovely touching
It's the
detail.
Queen Elizabeth sword.
Indeed.
There we go.
8:20, we're going to be meeting the 8th generation Oysterman. Oysterman? I'm not quite sure how you pronounce that. He'll be talking about everything that's going on in our water systems. He grows oysters.
Yeah.
Government, there's lots of issues going on around sewage being dumped into England's rivers and seas, and we'll talk to him about that.
Yeah, and Thames Water are a disgrace, it has to be said.
Yeah.
The more, every day there's something revealed about them, as indeed are most of these water companies. He's taking them on in court. He's saying, I've got to grow oysters filter the water, and you're literally throwing stuff into the water, in the rivers and the seas, killing fish and whatever, and my little oysters have to suck that and grow,
Yes,
grow on
but
that.
just in the interests of his business, his own oysters are in clean water. But he's doing it for the good of oysters as a whole.
And he's right. And do you know what? The man should be a hero. What time did we say that's happening?
Can't remember. 8:20.
8.
Anyway, keep your thoughts coming in. So many lovely stories about your experiences with the NHS, your ideas for reform. Keep them coming in. gbnews@gbnews.com, or you can tweet us at GBNews.
Today, and we are marking the 75th birthday of the NHS, which should be a thing to celebrate. But there's a lot of people that have issues and questions about this, and they want to discuss whether free healthcare should go. Is it outdated? Is it unsustainable?
So we have, for our debate, the Conservative Home columnist and GB News presenter Emily Carver. She says the NHS needs to be taken off life support.
Meanwhile, political commentator and friend of the show, Emma Burnell, thinks the NHS's existence is here to stay. And that is something that we should celebrate. But I suppose, Emma, the question always boils down to money. And then you say, well, what price do you put on health and having it free at the point of entry into the health service? I would just say this. People might say, pay for this, pay for that, pay for whatever. That's OK, we can pay for all that. But we would miss it if it was gone, wouldn't we?
Absolutely. And I don't think there's any political appetite really in the country to do anything other than have the NHS free at the point of use, paid for through our taxation. There will be lots of debates, and there always should be, because that's how democracy works, about what that means and what the model should be and how we deliver that going forward, you know, whether it should be reorganised again. And that's something that will continue to happen because it's a public service, so it's delivered through the oversight of democratic governments, and democratic governments will have different understandings of way of doing that. But fundamentally, the values that 75 years ago informed setting up the NHS, that nobody should be shut out of healthcare over cost, that we offer a service that is delivered and democratically overseen, delivered free at the point of use for anyone who needs it at any point in their life, from before they're born to the day they die. And that, I think, is something the British people have fully embraced. And, you know, we all have times when, you know, you can't get a GP appointment, or, you know, there are problems that we come across. But I don't think we have ever said those problems take away from the fundamental value of what we believe in.
But the problem in all of this is that when this was set up, people didn't live as long as they live, and they hadn't gone through a pandemic which has decimated the service. And, you know, Emma talks about that there's no sort of political appetite for major change to the NHS, but does that mean that there shouldn't be?
Well, it's interesting because Emma highlighted how it's governed by democratically elected governments, essentially. It's managed that way, and that's one of the issues that the NHS faces. It's used like a political football. You've got the Labour Party saying, oh, the Tories are trying to privatise it, they're underfunding it, etc., etc. The Tories saying, we love the NHS, we're going to pump more and more money into it. And I think if you took the politics a little bit more away, like we see in different European countries, you might get better outcomes. Because at the moment, yes, it's the 75th anniversary of the NHS, where, hey, fantastic. Isn't it that fantastic that we have a universal healthcare? But actually, do we? Because at the moment, we have 7.2 million people waiting on waiting lists. 10% of people diagnosed with cancer don't get treatment for 4 weeks. That is the difference between life and death. People are suffering in this country because the NHS is not fit for purpose. And I want universal healthcare, but there are other ways of doing it where there is more competition, more patient choice, and where people don't die as much.
On that point, Emma, I mean, the fact that we have this system which is free at the point of use and all these waiting lists, but it is true that if you're rich and you have private healthcare in this country, you can jump that queue already.
You can, and that's an option that some people have. It's the same with, you know, there are ways of improving the NHS, absolutely. And one of the key things, I think, is looking at some of the things that are putting pressure on the NHS, which aren't actually NHS services. So social care, for example. If we fix social care, which is a big ask, and lots of people have said, yeah, we're going to come and fix social care, and it doesn't happen. But if that happens, actually, the difference we'll see, not just in those people who desperately need better social care, but also in the pressures on the NHS. A lot of the issues that Emily's talking about will be vastly reduced because we're talking about because at the moment, there's so many people being treated in the NHS who actually need very different types of help. There is also the question of whether the NHS is a wellness service or a sickness service.
You think of that again, if it is a
wellness service
Yes.
or a sickness service,
Oh.
because we tend to treat the NHS as the place we go when we're ill.
Yeah.
Now, there are an awful lot of ways that we can improve our health in ways that would then take the pressure off the NHS. So if we had better public health, which is delivered through local government, if that were better invested in, again, that would change some of the pressures on the NHS. When we see things like vastly reduced smoking as a result of the smoking ban, things like that, that does make a huge difference to the pressures that come onto the NHS.
Okay, Emily, what do you think listening to that? I think you made a very good point about the difference between life and death as waiting lists, you know, for something like cancer. And I think it's not acceptable that you can say you're going to wait 6 weeks for that scan or something.
No, it's devastating for people and their families, really devastating. There have been study after study showing that if you were to receive healthcare in France or Germany or the Netherlands, you're more likely to stay alive, which is quite incredible because we talk about how fantastic the NHS is. And in its infancy, it was revolutionary, but it hasn't kept up with the pace of change on so many different metrics. And I would just want to point out just how much we are spending on the NHS, because we constantly hear it's underfunded, the Tories are trying to, you know, privatise it and ruin it, etc., etc. It was 27% of day-to-day government spending in 2000. It is now 44% of day-to-day departmental government spending. 44%. It's predicted that will rise to 50%.
So, are you saying that money's not the answer?
I'm saying if we pump more and more of our GDP, more and more of our government spending, it might improve.
Yeah.
Of course it would. If you put more money into anything, it's going to improve.
But at what price?
But it's not sustainable to be spending that much money constantly on the NHS when we have education, we have the police, we have security, we have, you know, everything that we need to spend money on.
We as consumers, we as patients would have to suck up some of that cost, and there's things we should pay for.
I think that we should be looking at places like Australia, places like Germany,
No, but
places
what would
like
we
Netherlands.
actually have to pay for? Like, say, to see a GP, would we have to pay 20 quid or...?
I don't know if it would be that. It would be more insurance that is topped up by the government if you can't afford it, essentially. And that's what we see in many, many countries where outcomes are better. People stay alive longer. They are treated quicker. And we need to look at these things because people... It seems, you know, people have said it before, but we treat the NHS like it's some kind of religion. We saw on BBC Newsnight how they had a choir singing Happy Birthday to the NHS as if it's something that is, you know, the most remarkable thing in the world. Well,
Thank goodness we cancelled that
many
this
other
morning,
countries have healthcare that is universal.
Yeah.
They just fund it differently.
Well, Keir Starmer's going to say the NHS is a service, not a shrine, today.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think in some ways, Emily and I are not as far apart. We fundamentally disagree on the model of delivery. I believe in a publicly funded National Health Service. But I think we both agree that there are things that can be done to reduce the pressures externally, which, as I was talking about previously, and also that the NHS, we need to separate the values that I think the British people really, really believe in terms of the NHS, and overemphasising any particular delivery model in terms of, you know, whether it should be an internal market or...
OK. Well, if it was simple, I'm sure they'd have solved it. Emma and Emily, thank you both very much indeed. Isabel was just telling us a story before we came on air with that one, which basically was a friend of hers was ill. It was abroad. It was Greece, was it? And you were... It was Corsica. Corsica. And trying to get an ambulance. Guy was ill, trying to get an ambulance, and that was fine. The ambulance arrived, but...
They wanted €80, and we didn't have €80 on us, so they drove us to a cash point before they would take us to the hospital. And there were a couple of sort of gap year students that were swanning around, you know, basically dragged themselves off the beach to drive this ambulance. It just wasn't what we were used to, and he was very, very unwell, and it was just an eye-opener for me. But, I mean, I think Corsica is a sort of backwater of France, isn't it, in many ways? It's sort of a holiday destination.
Okay, well,
but that's the fear.
That's the way it
always.
could be. That's the way it could be. 25 to 8 is the time. Stay with us. More bad news. If you own a house, you have a mortgage, prediction there could be 4 more interest rates this year alone.
Yes, and we'll be going through the papers with David Mellor and Scarlett Maguire.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard. We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often they will be difficult stories, stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed. So I guess they've always been quite woke. That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel. Britain's news channel.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamonn and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's 7:39. Joining us to go through the papers in more detail this morning is the former Chief Secretary to the Treasury, David Mellor, and the former Labour advisor, Scarlett Maguire.
And I've just said to both of them, they've chosen NHS stories. I said, I think we've had enough of the NHS. Have we had enough of the NHS?
Well, not really, because what Barclays says, it's the 75th anniversary. And, at some point, this country's got to get it straight about the NHS. Is the NHS a religion or is it a sort of business? If it's a religion, you can believe a lot of the nonsense they say, that it's the most wonderful thing on the planet. If it's a business, you've got to look at how they perform. And there's some wonderful work being done. My sister was an NHS director of nursing services at one of the biggest hospitals in the country, so I'm not against it. But I do feel that a lot of what they get away with in terms of performance wouldn't work in a much better managed organisation.
Scarlett, in the Telegraph front page, Tony Blair thinks that patients may be getting away with not having to pay, and he believes that a certain amount of payment would be good on behalf of patients.
No, they do say... I mean, I think a lot of people... It seems fine until you've got a chronic disease, right? And then I go into the chemist and I watch these people who have to pay for prescriptions time after time. I mean, having a chronic disease, there's nothing you can do about it.
Yeah.
And the whole payment thing. And the other thing is, he says, the better off should pay. Well, they do. I mean, if you want to jump the queue, it's really easy. The problem at the moment, of course, is for a lot of people who are not very well off, but in pain, is, I mean, I've seen friends of mine have sort of gathered all the money they can so that they can have a queue. But the other thing that the Tony Blair Institute says is that technology will answer it. And the problem with the Tony Blair Institute is this is their answer to everything.
What?
Teachers? Oh no, we'll just do everything online. Yeah, honestly. And you
We'll just do what?
Digital revolution.
Digital
all the time.
revolution will solve everything. But I remember Tony Blair saying, and that's how we'll solve climate change. I mean, if you're talking about a religion, he believes that digital
But why do
is
we
the
even
answer
bother
to
what he
everything.
thinks now? I mean, he's yesterday, isn't he? I know we're all yesterday. I'm very yesterday. But the point is that people should be thinking ahead. Whether Tony Blair thinks it's a good idea or not, it's a bit like asking, whether your friendly local caveman
It just
thinks
seems
it's a
interesting
good
that
idea
people are only prepared to offer a genuine opinion, it seems, on the NHS when they're out of post, whether it be Sajid Javid. We've had also Matt Hancock in the last few days with his penny's worth, and Tony Blair. We're in government or in opposition.
They can't do it in government.
No, or in opposition, it feels that there's a less honest discussion about perhaps some of the pitfalls and the problems. That would be my
If you're honest, you get the sack.
And this is where...
Which is why it shouldn't necessarily be in the hands of politicians.
I mean,
it should be like the Bank of England. I mean, we should put it in the hands of other people who can make long-term decisions.
And the Bank of England's made a wonderful job of it, haven't they?
I know. Well, you have
aiming for 2% inflation and ending up with 8.7. Even the NHS would do better than that.
But actually, I mean... But Emma was right. If we actually looked at social care properly, I mean, a young doctor said to me, you know, if you got rid of all the old people who are waiting to go into social care, and then you got rid of the fat people, which means we need to sort out obesity, no problem.
Well, what does he and that say? Final solution?
No. He just thought that if you solved those problems, then that's it. But we don't. We don't say, oh, there are specific
Well, Wes
things.
Streeting's coming out today trying to put emphasis on prevention rather than cure, and I do think the government would do better if they focus more on education.
But, you know, I like Wes. I think, you know, compared to most Labour front benchers, he's rather good. But, I mean, it's not a high bar, is it? But basically...
come on, David.
But basically, at the end of it all, you know, he's not saying anything new. Most of us have wanted, I mean, God, I was Minister of Health 30-odd years ago. Most of us have wanted to have an NHS health service as against a sickness service. And, you know, one of the ironies was you'd have people sitting, coughing away in doctors' waiting rooms who had nothing much wrong with them. Someone would be walking by thinking that they're in amazing shape. And they're about to have a massive heart attack from which they will not recover. I mean, none of these are new ideas.
No, but what... I mean, actually, Tony Blair was very brave in banning smoking from pubs and restaurants and made a whole difference to people's health and our attitude to smoking. But we are doing nothing about obesity. I mean, if I completely agree with you, but you know, this I mean, Rishi Sunak has and Boris Johnson before him actually ducked all the things that could help do preventative. We've got, I mean, if we want the NHS to go on, of course we've got to do preventative stuff.
We touched upon the Bank of England and the job they do in Scarlet, front page of the Eye. 4 more interest rates possible
rises
this year alone.
Well, I mean, the real problem is, isn't it, there is only one lever that the Bank of England sees for dealing with inflation, and that's putting up interest rates. Meanwhile, I mean, you sort of think, and when Rishi Sunak was asked about it, he just went, well, that's what's got to happen. And one remembers Norman Lamont in his bar saying, you know, if it's not...
pain without... There's no gain without
pain. And of course, Norman Lamont was not paining. It was all the poor people. But actually, I mean... It's not working. I mean, that's the other thing. It's not working. It takes a year before it's going to happen. We're not going to have half inflation, as Rishi Sunak wants. Meanwhile, what we're going to have is people beginning to not be able to afford their flats and houses.
It's not only not working, but we're seeing it sort of creating weaknesses in lots of financial institutions, and there are lots of worries about the impact of increasing rate rises constantly. I mean, we were told this was it, weren't we?
But this is one club golf. Classic one club golf. Well, what do we do about it? Let's put up interest rates. I would expect, you know, I don't have my high opinion, Mr. Bailey, and I'd have told you this, the Governor of the Bank of England, when he moved into the job because of what he'd done before in financial regulation and so on. But, you know, can't they... When a man was expected to hit a target of 2%, and it's 8.7%, why is he still in the job?
Speaking of being still in the job, let's talk about the front of The Guardian. Lots of questions about Sir Bernard Jenkins and the Privileges Committee. The Boris Johnson Brigade will be delighted to see the Met Police reopening this inquiry, although a bit of a blow for his supporters as well in the form of the investigation into Sean Bailey's party. What was it called? Jingle and Mingle.
Mingle and
Jingle.
Yes. It's a wonderful catchphrase, isn't it? Jingle
I've never
and
been
mingle
invited to a mingle
and get arrested. How wonderful. But don't you think a lot of this... Look, I thought what went on, you know, turning the garden of Number 10 into a sort of Chicago 1920s speakeasy was not clever politics and was also the wrong thing to do. But haven't we had enough of it now? I mean, we're looking back, apparently the police are looking back to 2020. And of course, the police will love doing this because it stops them getting on with their real job, which is tackling serious crime.
We have had enough of it, but, you know, isn't it important that a member of the Privileges Committee who was investigating, I suppose it wasn't actually investigating the parties, is investigating whether or not the Prime Minister misled Parliament, and that's the crucial difference. But, he, you know, it's the gamekeeper and the poacher kind of argument. She should have recused himself.
Yes, except I think he'd probably say that that's not... I mean, if they investigate that, there are a lot of Conservatives. I mean, we're talking Eleanor Lang, who's one of the deputy speakers. It was in her office. We're talking Bernard Jenkins' wife. There was a whole room full of people. I mean, I think the public, and certainly I know that Parliament are really, really tired of it. And I mean, the Mingle and Jingle party, we have known about. I mean, we saw that photo ages ago. I mean, I thought it was appalling at the time, but actually, I agree with you. I think we can't go on going back to it.
Guys, we'll be coming back to you two in 40 minutes' time. For the moment, David and Scarlett, thank you both very much indeed. We head to Scotland now to talk about Scotland. Today will mark the coronation of King Charles III with the ceremony at St Giles Cathedral in Edinburgh.
Yeah, the monarch is to be presented with the crown jewels of Scotland, and the proceedings will include a new sword named after the late Queen Elizabeth.
With his view, his take and his information on all of this, former royal butler, it's Grant Harold.
And Scott, we should add.
To find out more, as you will hear from his beautiful tones, as you know. Where are you today, though, Grant?
Good morning, Eamonn. Good morning, Isabel. I'm actually on the Highgrove Estate. I'm down here with you guys, but sadly not in Scotland for this special occasion.
Yeah. Friend, the King, though, and the fact we're going through this week of events in Scotland this week. Scotland is very important, not only to him, but to the royal family in general. And, of course, it's where the late Queen Elizabeth died. Mm.
It is. It's somewhere that the royal family have always loved being. The late Queen called it a Highland paradise, and I think, as we've said in the past, Eamonn, that it didn't surprise me that the Queen actually, if it was her plan, that she died there, because it's somewhere that she absolutely adored. And likewise, her son, the King. I remember often travelling to Scotland with the King, and also staying at Holyrood Palace and attending different royal events, and I know how passionate he is for Scotland and for its people. So that's why I'm really glad that they're having this. I know some people nickname it a second coronation, but this Thanksgiving service, I'm really glad this is happening.
Yeah, so on that point, it's interesting, Buckingham Palace being at pains not to let it be called a second coronation. But, I mean, it will look and feel much like one, won't it, with the crown jewels being presented, the crown jewels of Scotland being presented to the King?
Yeah. It is kind of like a second coronation. I know the palace is saying it isn't, and of course he's not going to be crowned. The last monarch was Charles II. Actually, was crowned with this particular crown, which is the oldest crown in the country. But I think they always want to make it very clear that it isn't another coronation. He's already been crowned King of the United Kingdom. This, as you said, is presenting the honours of Scotland, which is the crown, the sceptre, and the new sword of state. And it's very symbolic, and it's a people's procession as well. You've got the royal procession, but you've also got a people's procession, which is communities all getting together, walking down that famous Royal Mile from Edinburgh Castle to St Giles's. Then you've got the honours of Scotland, another procession. Then a royal procession from the palace, which is the official residence of the King, to St Giles's. And then you'll have this service of Thanksgiving. And then after that, obviously, a fly past back at the palace. So it's going to have the feel, I think, of a coronation. But as they've said, it's not a coronation. It's a Thanksgiving service for the new King and Queen of Scotland.
Now, you worked for the King before he was the King. Do you wish... Is it something now, would you like to work for him now that he is monarch?
Do you know, part of me, Eamonn, I've got to say, I feel very proud, as you know. I feel very proud that I had the honour of looking after and working for him. And I still, even to this day, I still pinch myself and think I'm so grateful for those memories, and also getting to know the late Queen. However, I think now, as we've had in news over the last year, that the household has very much changed. A lot of my colleagues are no longer there. There's obviously a lot of changes been happening, and so for me, I'm really grateful that I was there when I was there, and you know, I don't have any regrets. Only sometimes when you see the odd thing go wrong, I think, I wonder if I was there, if that would go wrong.
Well, I bet it wouldn't.
And hopefully the answer is no.
I just wanted to know, because obviously you're based on the Highgrove estate, and obviously we know that's King Charles's favourite place, really, and if he wasn't king at the moment, he'd be spending most of his time there. Has he messed around the place? He's so busy now.
Do you know, you do occasionally still see him. It's quite interesting. You do see him about quite often, and he is busy, and I'm sure he's here less than he used to be. But, you know, Highgrove was somewhere that he adores. You know, I think it was reported even after the coronation he came back to Highgrove. It's somewhere that he escaped from everything, and as you know, it's open to the public. There's visitors come and see the gardens and get to know him in a strange way, because he's put everything into these gardens, and this is his paradise. This is something he likes to escape to. That, and I should mention Scotland, his two loves.
Indeed.
Well, thanks for bringing us up to date there, Grant. Always a pleasure to talk to you, my friend. Thank you very much indeed. Just say goodbye to you and good luck to the King for that big day in Edinburgh today.
And let's take a look at the sun will be shining on him. Here's Aidan McGivern with your forecast.
Hello, very good morning to you. It's Aidan McGivern here from the Met Office with the GB News forecast for Wednesday. A bright start for many of us, but cloud is already building, especially towards the north and the west, and we'll see a scattering showers by the afternoon. However, the wet weather that many southern parts of the UK experienced yesterday, that's well on its way into the Low Countries, along with a strengthening wind. Gales could cause disruption for the Netherlands and Germany during the day. But across the UK, actually, the weather settles down as that system clears through. There'll be a lot of cloud, but some glimmers of sunlight coming through at times. And there'll also be a scattering of showers. These will be hit and miss. Some places will avoid them and stay dry. But where the showers do occur, they could be quite heavy. Otherwise, where we avoid the showers, temperatures comfortably reaching 22 or 23 Celsius in the south and southeast, 17 to 19 across Scotland, Northern Ireland and Northern England, which actually is about bang on average for the time of year. Then into the evening, we're going to see the showers fade away in most places, but not everywhere. There will still be some showers across western Scotland, 1 or 2 for Northern Ireland and North Wales, for example. Best chance of dry and clear weather towards the southeast. However, most places will keep temperatures in the double figures, 11 to 14 Celsius as we begin Thursday. Thursday starts off with some sunshine. Eastern Scotland, for example, the Northern Isles, the Midlands, East Anglia and the south seeing some decent blue skies first thing. The cloud will develop, though, and by lunchtime I think it is mostly cloudy out there. That cloud giving a few showers once again for Scotland, Northern England and North Wales. But Northern Ireland turns wetter by the afternoon with some strengthening winds from the south, 18 Celsius here, 21 or 22 Celsius towards the southeast. That wetter and windier weather pushes into Scotland on Friday, turns more showery, whilst England and Wales turn drier, sunnier and warmer, with temperatures approaching 30 Celsius by the start of the weekend in the southeast.
Well, there we go. That's the weather picture today and tomorrow. Stay with us, because we're going to be asking what the government plans to do to improve the NHS. Health think tanks, and you're having your say about this as well. But will it last? Will it still be there to mark 100 years? Mark its 100th birthday. Will any of us?
First and foremost, I'm a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing. We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The people's channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamonn.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us. From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamonn and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com? You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
The Health Secretary rejects an overhaul of the NHS on its 75th anniversary, as experts warn it's in a critical condition. Good morning, it's 8 o'clock on Wednesday the 5th of July. This is Breakfast on GB News with Eamonn Holmes and Isabel Webster.
Leading the news this morning, evolution, not revolution. That's the message from the Health Secretary, with the NHS turning 75 today. But it comes as the country's 3 main health think tanks warn that without investment, it won't reach its 100th birthday.
Boris Johnson's Partygate investigator, Sir Bernard Jenkins, facing a police probe into claims he broke lockdown rules. Scotland Yard's looking into a birthday drinks held for the Conservative MP's wife, Baroness Jenkins, in Parliament in December 2020.
Schools in England face closure today as teachers walk out over paying conditions, as well as lessons. End-of-term events like school trips, plays and sports days are predicted to face widespread disruption.
King Charles will be presented with Scotland's crown jewels at a ceremony to mark his coronation today. We'll be live from the procession in Edinburgh.
Will
it be a day? Scotland's capital on this historic day where King Charles III will be presented with Scotland's crown jewels.
And I must say, he wears a very distinctive, different kilt.
He does.
It's quite an
Even
interesting
the Queen
tartan.
had a beautiful kilt with a sort of tartan lapel yesterday. I thought she looked fabulous.
And what will the day be like for that royal occasion in Edinburgh, or indeed anywhere else? A day of sun or showers? We'll have your latest weather update.
It's been a cool and in some places wet start to the month, but the heat returns in some places by the end of the week. I'll have the full details in the forecast coming up.
Okay, our top story this morning. The Health Secretary has called for evolution, not revolution, when it comes to the NHS, as it turns 75 today.
Whatever that means, but we're all using it today anyway. Writing in the Times, Steve Barclay, he calls, his predecessor called for a royal commission. Steve Barclay is saying he was committed to the model of free for the NHS at the point of use.
But it comes as the country's three main health think tanks have all warned that the NHS won't make it to its 100th birthday without more support.
Well, Tom Harwood, our man, has been looking back at the institution's history.
I've been asked to tell you just a little about this new plan for better health. Our plan is a service which will provide the best medical advice and treatment for everyone, every man, woman and child in this country.
These were the words of Conservative Health Minister Henry Willink speaking in 1944, announcing his plans for what would become the NHS. His 1944 White Paper was the blueprint for the National Health Service.
Mr. Aneurin Bevan.
But it was Aneurin Bevan, the Labour Minister for Health, who brought the NHS into existence in July 1948. Under Bevan, the reach of the state stretched further than the original Conservative plans. Care was not only to be paid for by the taxpayer, but hospitals themselves were nationalised too. Healthcare professionals became government employees. The NHS quickly became a cherished national institution. But the course was not always smooth. Prescription charges were introduced in 1952 after the cost of the service unexpectedly began to grow. The ensuing decades saw the NHS buffeted by various political winds. The Conservative years under Thatcher and Major introduced internal markets, attempting to increase efficiency. Under Blair's Labour government, these reforms were built upon, aided by significant injections of funding into the service. The new funding smoothed the path to a drive of modernisation, patient choice and public-private partnerships. Blair's devolution agenda also saw the Scotland Act and the Government of Wales Act give devolved bodies powers to legislate on a range of issues, including health, leading to greater divergence in health policy across the UK. Yet, in the backdrop of the 2008 financial crash, the budget balancing measures of David Cameron's coalition government led to smaller real terms increases in budgets than occurred under Labour, and a controversial reorganisation under the Health and Social Care Act of 2012, creating clinical commissioning groups and increasing competition in service provision. The past decade brought with it unprecedented challenges. The NHS's handling of the COVID-19 pandemic under Boris Johnson's government, to many displayed its resilience and adaptability. To others, it exposed shortcomings. Frontline staff faced overwhelming pressure, yet they rose to the challenge, embodying the spirit of the service envisaged 75 years ago. Today, the NHS budget has never been higher, yet waiting lists and patient care face significant strains. The cost of the service has risen by 50% in real terms when compared to 2009. As we celebrate the 75th anniversary of the NHS, the debate continues on how to sustainably fund and manage this British institution. With an ageing population, new medical innovations and a consequently ballooning budget, questions remain as to what the NHS will look like after another 75 years. Tom Harwood, GB News.
And as we mark the birthday of the NHS, let's cross to our reporter Jack Carson, who's in the hometown of the Labour politician, it should be said, who was behind the creation of it, Nye Bevan. Good morning to you. Jack, where are you?
Morning, I'm in Tredegar in Wales, which is the birthplace of Aneurin Bevan. You can probably see behind me a mural which has been put on the shopping centre here. It was created by local artist Paul Shepherd and has been painted with one of the famous quotes from Aneurin Bevan when he, of course, introduced the NHS and founded it 75 years ago today. It reads that he said that all I'm doing is extending to the entire population the benefits of Tredegar that we've had in Tredegar. We're going to Tredegarise confuse you. That is in reference to the Tredegar Workmen's Medical Aid Society, which was a society here initially founded back in 1890, where local people would essentially pay a small contribution to the society for then access to free healthcare and treatment at the point of use. But of course, since the NHS was founded 75 years ago, it has undergone mass changes and of course devolution as well, because when the NHS was created, of course, there was an initial focus in post-war Britain of bouts of short-term injury and infection, but of course, as we know, as our own lifestyles have changed, a lot of the NHS treatment is now onto longer-term care, for which of course there is no cure. When you look at how much the government spends on the NHS, in every pound that it spends on public services, when you take out welfare out of that, it's 40p in every single pound. But of course, as the NHS has developed over the last 75 years, of course, we did get that devolution a couple of decades ago, and it's come this week in Wales for the NHS, as the British Medical Association for Wales is warning the Welsh Government about the number of GP surgeries and doctors falling as patient numbers rise. It's written to the Welsh Government urging more funding and staff help. It's launched its Save Our Surgeries campaign. It says GP practices in Wales has fallen by 18% in the last decade, but patient numbers have increased by 95,000. The Welsh Government say that it has taken steps to help them by increasing services into community pharmacists. But of course, as that devolution goes on, Rishi Sunak, the Prime Minister, is of course announced last week his big reforms for the NHS, including training more staff, with doubling the number of adult nurses training by 2031, 24,000 of those training. But it's not just, of course, retaining, it's and training, it's also reforming the NHS and the way in which the NHS works, so to cut down things like those waiting times.
OK, Jack, thank you very much indeed. We cross now to the Health Minister. Not only the Health Minister, she's also a nurse. That's Maria Caulfield. Maria, a very, very good morning to you. When I say you are a nurse, suppose you're trained, you're always a nurse. I'm fascinated with this, Maria. Tell us a bit about your nursing, where you did it, and the experience that you got from it.
Yeah, so I trained, I've been in the health service nearly 30 years, so I'm feeling extremely old today. I trained at Mayday, what was called Mayday in Croydon. It's now changed its name. I worked at St Thomas's in London, but I spent most of my time at the Royal Marsden in London as a cancer nurse. And it was actually working as a nurse that got me into politics, because I moved down to Brighton and one of my local hospitals was under threat of closure, and I got on board on the campaign to save it, and thankfully it's still going. But it's a slippery slope in politics. Once you get involved in one campaign, before you know it, you're standing for Parliament. So I never meant to stand for Parliament, and it was really my experience of the NHS that really got me involved in politics.
You see, that qualifies you in so many areas with your experience, including the strikes that go on. And the thing that gets me, Maria, we sit here day after day, and one side says this, the other side says that. It doesn't seem to be any closer to an agreement with doctors, junior or senior.
No, I agree, and our call is really for the BMA really to get back around the table and have those conversations. We did listen to the consultants when they said pensions were an issue, and we resolved that in the spring statement. The Chancellor lifted their lifetime allowance. We've resolved it with the nurses, which is great news. Over 1 million workers now will be getting that extra pay in their pay packet this month, which will really make a difference. So it is the junior doctors and the consultant strike that is the main one, and that's going to have a big impact on patients with appointments and procedures being cancelled. So absolutely, we want to resolve this for patients, but it's also happening in Wales, where Labour government run the health service there, and in Scotland with the SNP. So there's strike action across the UK, but in England we absolutely do want to resolve that with the unions, and would urge them to get back around the table for talks.
Although so many people will just assume this is the new normal, as you say, many operations, 650,000, and that waiting list somewhere around 7.4 million, possibly could well go up. And then the Health Secretary coming out today saying what we need is evolution, not revolution. Everybody knows how long evolution takes.
Well, absolutely. But what I would say on the waiting list is, although we've got more people on the waiting list, the waiting times are coming down. And I think for most people who are waiting for an operation or a procedure, it's how long they wait, not who else is on that waiting list. And we've eliminated the 2-year wait. We've virtually eliminated the 18-month wait. And we're now working on those who are waiting for a year. So it's really important that we do that. And strike action doesn't help, to be honest. It does mean that procedures and operations are often cancelled. So that's why we do want the unions to come around the table and try and resolve that for patients.
Yeah, and public satisfaction is incredibly low. A new survey showing 1 in 3 have been able to get access to services since the pandemic. Waiting lists affecting 1 in 8. We've obviously got an ageing population. Lots of questions about whether this current model from birth, from cradle to grave, actually is sustainable. And we hear people, former health secretaries coming out saying it's time for a royal commission. Even Tony Blair coming out and saying that. What's your view on that?
Well, the only thing with the Royal Commission, I would say, is that takes years, and the announcements we've made over the recent months are about improving services now. So our workforce plan is about getting more doctors and nurses and healthcare professionals in primary care and secondary care, but also in terms of our investment in our infrastructure. So we've got our 40 new hospitals, we've got over 100 new community diagnostic centres so people can get their tests more quickly. We've got surgical hubs, over 100 of those being opened, so people can get their operations more quickly. They're the sorts of things that will make a difference, both now in the short term in terms of those waiting lists, but also will future-proof the NHS as well. So a Royal Commission, you know, it's good in theory, but actually that won't produce results for many, many years, and we need to focus on the here and now.
Well, obviously, Sajid Javid wouldn't have said what he said if he was in office. And this is the frustrating thing, talking to guys like you, politicians like you. I mean, we're totally aware what you can say and what you can't say. But what I'm trying to tickle out of you is, if you were in charge, if you were running the show, not to undermine your boss or anything like that, but what do you think from your experience as a nurse, what you've come through the years, what is there? People talk about it needs more investment, it needs more staff, it needs whatever. What do you think the NHS needs if you could wave a magic wand?
Yeah, so from my experience, it isn't just about how much money you spend on the NHS, it's how you spend it. So I don't want to be too party political, but when Labour in government, they spent a huge amount of money trying to roll out an IT system, spent billions on that never saw the light of day. And the money that we're spending now, whether it's investing in staff, you know, reintroducing the apprenticeship routes for many healthcare workers, whether it's about improving the buildings. I know from my experience, I've worked on long, old Nightingale wards. They're very difficult to nurse in. There's no privacy for patients, there's no space to be able to do procedures. And making those changes, making our buildings, our hospitals, our diagnostic centres fit for the future, that makes a difference for the staff, it helps with retention, but it also improves the experience for patients. And I think it's what you do with the money, not how much you spend, that is as important.
Can I just ask about, sorry, just while you're there, about staff. Maria, I've spent 3 weeks in 2 NHS hospitals in the last year, and I can honestly say to you, I understand how it saves you money, but there is a massive difference being treated by a member of staff and an agency person that comes in. And I'll tell you what it is, Maria. It's the handover, it's the join up, it's the investment. And the individuals themselves are very talented, that's all fine. But they're not invested in the process in the same way that the other staff are. And so you may save money with agency staff, but you're losing out on a joined-up strategy, on, as you said, about nursing on the wards there. I could see it was obvious it's a problem. Agency staff, they're needed, but there are too many of them.
Yeah, no, and I'm a bank nurse myself, so I'm not on an agency, but absolutely. And you know, when I was a nurse in charge on the wards, it's actually very difficult when you've got lots of agency or bank nurses because they are there just for the shift, and they may not be able to do many of the procedures that the substantive full-time permanent staff can do. And so that's often a factor in staff retention. If you're busy on a ward and you're working with a different kind of set of nurses every single day, that's quite tricky. So that's why we've got our long-term workforce plan. So we increase the numbers dramatically. We're doubling the number of nurse training positions because we need to get those permanent, whether they're part-time, full-time staff on the wards, and absolutely reduce the use of agency staff, because it actually does cost us quite a lot of money as well to find those agency staff. But as you say, they're there for a shift. Their ability to be able to transform care or be able to have that continuity of care for patients is also limited. They do a great job. We do need them, but you're absolutely right. That's the direction of travel. That's why we're spending £2.4 billion both for nursing agency staff to reduce their use, but also for medical locums as well. Because absolutely, Eamonn, that's the experience both for patients and nurses is better when you've got permanent staff.
Yeah, and hugely costly, as you say. And look, you were saying earlier, it's not how much you spend, it's how you spend it. And you talked also specifically about that waiting list and almost sort of dismissive of the fact it's 7.4 million people, because you're saying that the waiting time is being reduced. But I just want to ask you, do you think it's acceptable to have a waiting list of 7.4 million? And are you comfortable with that waiting list getting longer?
Well, we know during COVID, and I know there was waiting lists before COVID, but we know during COVID where we had to shut down kind of routine care, that helped build up the waiting list that we have now. And we expect that to actually climb a little bit before spring next year.
What's a little bit when we're talking about 7.4 million?
So, I think we're almost at the peak there, but what's important is how quickly people get those procedures, and that has fallen dramatically. So people were waiting 2 years this time last year. They're now waiting around a year or less, and that's the important thing. And, they've not been able to do that in Wales, where Labour run the health service. Many thousands of people are still waiting for 2 years there. But absolutely, that's why we're putting so much investment. We're increasing the number of staff, we're improving the facilities. Surgical hubs, for example, not being part of the acute side of a hospital means that they're less likely to see operations cancelled because of an A&E admission or an ITU bed not being available. That will absolutely speed up how quickly we can get people their procedures. The rapid diagnostic centres where people can go for CTs and MRIs, again, they're not being impacted by the acute side of the hospital where maybe someone in A&E needs that urgent MRI or CT. And that is, so it's about how we have the services as well as kind of, the traditional way of doing things, because you can get through those waiting lists much, much quicker if you have these kind of standalone facilities which are not impacted so much by what's happening in the acute side of a hospital trust or in a GP practice as well.
Maria, could I just say, it's a pleasure talking to a minister who is an expert in their field, who knows what they're talking about, who's invested in their particular field. So I just want to say that's very refreshing talking to you. It's been very interesting hearing from you this morning. Thank you very much indeed. Maria Caulfield is the Health Minister and a former nurse. Thank you very much indeed.
No, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Right, with the time at 8:19, let's bring you up to date with the rest of today's top stories. And schools in England are facing closure today as teachers walk out again over pay and conditions, and as well as lessons, end-of-term events like school trips and sports days are predicted to face disruption. Members of the National Education Union will also walk out on Friday.
Artificial intelligence has the potential to boost Britain's economy by £400 billion. According to a report by Google, the tech giant insisted that while jobs will be lost to AI across a range of sectors, that will be outweighed by economic benefits. However, it also called for greater regulation of the technology.
Wimbledon fans should expect sunnier spells and fewer showers after heavy rain on the tournament's second day stopped play on outside courts. Overall, today we'll see scattered bouts of rain across southeast England, but it should feel slightly warmer for many.
We're concentrating on Scotland today, marking the coronation of King Charles with a ceremony at St Giles Cathedral in Edinburgh.
The monarch will be presented with the crown jewels of Scotland, and the proceedings will include a new sword that's been named after the late Queen.
Let's speak to GB News royal correspondent Cameron Walker, who is in Edinburgh and will tell us what will unfold there today. Cameron.
Well, Eamonn, the anticipation is building here in Edinburgh. The barriers are out, expecting a lot of crowds here for that procession on the Royal Mile. 700 members of the armed forces from the Army, Royal Navy and Royal Air Force as well will be processing up the Mall. All led by a Shetland pony, who is the mascot of the Royal Regiment of Scotland. A tri-service Guard of Honour is also going to be meeting the King, the Queen and the Prince and Princess of Wales, known as the Duke and Duchess of Rothesay, at the Palace of Holyrood House later. Just before the ceremony, the presentation of the honours of Scotland to King Charles III at St Giles's Cathedral. It's a crown, it's a sceptre and a brand new sword named after Queen Elizabeth II. And the sword is going to be held by Dame Catherine Grainger, the former Olympic gold medalist. And the rest of the crown jewels, the crown and the sceptre, the oldest in the British Isles. There's also going to be a people's procession escorting the honours of Scotland from Edinburgh Castle down to St Giles's Cathedral. Following that service, the service of Thanksgiving, there's going to be a 21-gun salute at Edinburgh Castle and, weather permitting, fingers crossed, a display of the red arrows going down the Royal Mile and over the Palace of Holyrood House. Not everyone is happy about this Honours of Scotland procession taking place, so the Green leaders not very happy. They have boycotted the service, as has former SNP leader Alex Salmond as well. But all of the celebrations are going to be kicking off this afternoon.
Good man, Cameron. Thank you very much indeed.
I thought we might be seeing a picture of Cameron in a kilt.
Oh.
Did I misunderstand that? Let's see if we got a little teaser.
Everybody's
Sorry to... Oh,
asking me
look
about
at you
that.
looking very dashing there.
Oh, no.
We couldn't let you go.
Thank you, Isabel.
Without...
Appreciate
No,
it.
absolutely fabulous.
It's a bit of a maxi kilt, that, covering
you-
his knees and everything.
Are you Scottish, Cameron, or are you just, you know, getting in the spirit of things?
Yes.
Yeah.
No, so I am half Scottish, so that's my clan tartan. That's a Stewart of Appin tartan, which comes from the west coast, just north of Oban. So yes, it was a family wedding last year. That's where that picture.
Oh, he looks very dashing.
He's very Scottish. I mean, that Cameron bit's
Thank
Scottish.
you.
That
Walkers,
gives it away.
as in the Walkers biscuits, you know, the tartan shortbread and all
got
that
it
sort of
now.
thing. You probably... Do you own that biscuit company, do you?
I wish I did. No, unfortunately, we do not own any of that, or the whiskey, or the books, or the crisps.
Yet. Life is long. Thank you so much, Cameron. Have a wonderful day. It sounds like it's going to be very special.
Now, next we're going to be meeting an oysterman, 8th generation, right? It's been going on in his family for 8 generations.
Not to be confused with an Ulsterman.
No, no.
Wait,
no.
sorry.
He grows oysters. And he is taking the government to court over these utility companies, these water companies. This man is a hero. He's trying to get these water companies to stop dumping the sewage. Find out what he's going to do to make that come about after this.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard. We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often they will be difficult stories, stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed. So I guess they've always been quite woke. That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel. Britain's news channel.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the live desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views, and often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamonn and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
It's 8:28.
And still to come on the programme this morning, in 15 minutes' time, we're going to be hearing the incredible story of a woman who bravely battled cystic fibrosis and a double lung transplant with the help of the NHS. Talking about this because the NHS marking 75th anniversary.
And at 9:15, the jazz singer Natalie Rashti will be here in the studio to tell us all about her brand new charity single honouring the life and legacy of Dame Deborah James, aka Bowel Babe.
And you can join in our discussions, you can pay tribute, gbviews at gbnews.com, or you can tweet at GB News. Lovely to hear from you. Now, we've got a man coming on we're going to speak to next who is a crusader, who is a hero, in my view. And he is involved in the government's £56 billion plan to reduce raw sewage dumping from overflows. And he's going to court today to challenge this whole thing.
Yes, an oysterman from Devon is the man taking the government to the High Court to stop sewage being dropped into the sea and rivers.
Richard Hayward, oysters have been in his family for 8 generations, and he argues that the government strategy just isn't up to scratch. It allows these utility companies to pollute water and beaches for another 27 years. We join Richard now live by satellite, and he will tell us more about this. Or Tom, sorry, live by satellite. Tom, sorry, I do think you're a hero for this, and I just think if it isn't for people like you standing up to what these utility companies, what the government has allowed these utility companies to get away with since they privatised these companies, then who will? So, first of all, my admiration and congratulations to you. What is firing you up? What is inside your chest that is driving you for this?
My daughter's future, maybe. I mean, the thing is, it's not just my family's future. I mean, we've been growing oysters, not in Devon, so I'm on holiday in Devon, in Essex, a little island called Mersey in Essex, which is where Romans were meant to have discovered oysters. And my family, my 5th great-grandfather started growing oysters there in the 1700s, and I walk across the same bit of mud to this day that he used to walk across, hand-picking oysters. And so there's a history, there's a legacy of this island nation that's been producing some of the finest oysters in the world, and water companies are basically putting that all at risk, potentially destroying 8 generations, possibly, if my daughter wants to, 9 generations of legacy. So it's not just for my family, but for the UK, is that water companies are destroying what is
And nobody's stopping them. And you know, Tom, just explain to us basically. We're not saying this. Hopefully, your oysters are poison-free and pollutant-free and whatever. But explain to people what an oyster actually does and what the water companies are doing that messes that up.
Well, an oyster is a filter feeder. So actually, an oyster is an amazing animal. It filters the water that it grows in, and one oyster will filter about 100 litres of water a day. So the millions of oysters on our 15 acres of oyster beds, well, they're filtering so much water, it's cleaning the water. So oysters clean the water and make the quality better. They improve biodiversity. They make everything fantastic and absorb the nutrients, the wonderful nutrients of the surrounding area. But if there's tons of sewage in the water, well, the oyster will absorb that too and kill the oyster. Or if it doesn't kill the oyster, potentially contaminate the oyster so much they can make them too dangerous for people to eat. And then that's on me, that I've got to deal with something so horrendous as potentially giving people something that could make them seriously ill or worse. So an oyster is one of the most amazing organisms you'll see and has made UK famous around the world. So that can't carry on, and by water companies in potentially stopping that. So we've got to do something.
The timing of this High Court challenge is really interesting because, of course, yesterday Thames Water was fined £3 million, wasn't it? And the judge was really tough on them, said they'd either deliberately been dishonest or had been breathtakingly blind when they were dealing with the Environment Agency over the investigation. I mean, were you pleased to see that fine, or did it actually infuriate you to see exposed the kind of levels of dishonesty that were going on in these utilities companies?
I don't think the fine was enough. I mean, the problem is, and this is part of the reason why we're going to court, is the fines that have been coming out are not big enough, because if they were big enough, the water companies wouldn't carry on doing what they're doing, and we wouldn't therefore have to go to court. So a £3 million fine is huge, or it seems huge, but to a company like Thames or Anglian Water, where I'm from, these fines are so minuscule that they're relevant to these companies. I'm saying that Thames is going under, but that's not because of fines. That's because of the billions in dividends they pay out to these shareholders in far-off lands, you know. So when you're paying out, water companies have paid out something like 57 billion in dividends since they became privatised. Well, what's 3 million to them? Nothing, is it? So it's not enough. It's good. It's not enough.
And talking about money, I mean, how do you pay for these challenges to the government? And I know that Wild Fish have come out and said that water companies need to pick up the bills for these challenges.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the thing is, people say, how do you pay for it? But at the end of the day, if you're able to load yourself with debt of something like 60 billion, then pay out dividends of something like 60 billion, then there's money there. There's money to invest in your infrastructure, and there's money to invest and pay for challenges like we're doing. But the thing is, we wouldn't need to challenge if they actually just did their job. I mean, I find it shocking that water, one of the most obvious and basic human rights, are being profiteered like this. I mean, it's to me, it blows my mind. I mean, if I wasn't doing my job properly, I'd be making people very unwell and be shut down. Yeah. They're not doing their job properly. They're making people ill and unwell, and they're allowed to carry on. Seems bonkers to me.
It's more than bonkers. It's absolutely immoral. It is disgusting. And we've got to stand up and just basically say, these people are not carrying out their licence to the degree that they are required to, and the government are enabling them. They get away with it. They handed out the franchises in the first place. They should be able to revoke them from them. You've raised your head above the parapets. You're going into court with this one, but other companies must be affected as well. What type of companies generally would you be talking about who this affects? I mean, it affects all of us in a way, but who else has livelihoods at risk with all of this?
I mean, that's the fascinating thing. I think we don't realise how far-reaching it for coastal communities, say, because, like where I live, so the island where I live, it's beautiful. When I go to wilderness, like 10-minute boat trip from the shoreline, and it's a wilderness. And what I see there is you get people like paddleboarding, you've got restaurants, you've got people that go crabbing, all these different things. You know, these. If the waterways are polluted, people won't be able to paddleboard, they won't be able to swim, restaurants won't be able to get fresh seafood. I mean, we'll go, you know, we'll get quiet and go shut down. So it affects everyone.
Well, Tom, come back. Let us know how you get on with this legal challenge. We wish you all the very best with your oysters. I've been to Mersey Island. I've had oysters there.
Applause
and they
to
are
you.
fabulous. Thanks very much indeed for your time. We should stress on all of this that we did actually reach out to the government, ask them if they wanted to comment. They didn't get back to us. But in the past on this, they have said their plans to reduce storm discharges and clean up rivers is lawful and went beyond any existing legal requirements. And they say it's the largest infrastructure investment plan to improve water quality.
Believe it when we see it. Right, it is 8:37 exactly. Stay with us. We'll find out who's tipped to win Wimbledon as we go through the papers with David Miller and Scarlett Maguire next.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamonn.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us. From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamonn and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com? You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
The papers, David Miller, Scarlett Maguire with those this morning. And Scarlett, we want to begin with a Front page of the Mirror. It's a Mirror exclusive about my friend, former colleague, and the television presenter Fiona Phillips.
This is an absolutely terrible story. She's 62 years old, and for 18 months she's known she's had Alzheimer's. Her parents both died of it, and actually, if you remember, many years ago, I think Gordon Brown was Prime Minister at the time, or even before that, she actually led a campaign, a government campaign, about Alzheimer's and dementia and what you should do about it, and talked about her father having it. And it is really worth reading the whole of the interview, because a lot of it, her husband has to fill in the facts. I mean, she can't remember. She can remember being in the doctor's office when he said, "You've got Alzheimer's," but all the things before, because they thought it was the menopause and they hoped it was, and the HRT would cure it. And you have this woman, I mean, who, you know, was known on TV, was bright, sparky, wonderful, and she's now going down here. She is on a trial for drugs that might work. But the problem with trials is you don't know if you're on the real drug or if you're on the placebo, so they don't know. And we just have to hope. And we have to remember that actually we need to do something about Alzheimer's.
It's just such a cruel illness because it takes away all your memories, all your personality. For family members to watch, I think it's particularly hard. And I think 62 is no age. She always probably suspected, I mean, she's a dear friend of yours, Eamonn. I think she always suspected she would get it, but not at 62. What do you think?
I mean, I think of my own wife who's... both parents, her father died for it, her mother has to live with it at the moment, and anybody who's in that situation will be thinking, is it coming to me next?
Well, my parents both died with dementia. Now, dementia is different from Alzheimer's. I mean, one of the things about dementia is it's basically you lose your short-term memory, whereas Alzheimer's, you completely change your personality. Both my parents were looked after at home and died in their beds. I mean, so it wasn't that awful thing of having Alzheimer's, not knowing who anybody is. It is terrible. But I mean, I did talk to a neuro person who said to me, "Don't worry, it's not genetic." But clearly, Alzheimer's is, and this is terrible.
Well, we wish Fiona all the best.
Yeah, absolutely.
David, front page of the Telegraph has great interest for you. US pushes for von der Leyen to be NATO chief.
I think that Joe Biden is the most anti-British president in living memory, and possibly even in the memory of the quite long dead. It's quite outrageous the way he behaves. You know, he's a let's pretend Irishman dressing up in the green and prancing around like some, you know, sad old pensioner on a holiday in the Emerald Isle. In fact, his links to the Emerald Isle are no greater than his links to England. But basically, this man has got it in for us. And he now wishes...
To the point that he's racist, do you think?
Well, I never, because I think racism is never a helpful concept in this context. What he is anti-British, and what he is somebody who doesn't understand the significance of what he's trying to do, which may take us back to the earlier conversation about the effect of old age on people's capabilities.
But do you think it's all about Brexit, really, this? You know,
no. He's always been
the position we've taken on
the point
Brexit.
Where we've got to with him is that he is prepared to try and put in charge of NATO a woman who was for 6 years the defence secretary in Germany and was awful and failed to keep up. You know, Germany still doesn't pay the 2% of GDP for defence, and basically Biden appears to think that that is what Europe needs. And you know what I find so awful? This will be a test not only of Biden, because we know that he'll flunk it, it'll be a test of Rishi Sunak. Biden is coming over next week. He just wants some photo opportunities with the royals. The Germans, unfortunately, don't have royals unless they disinter former Führers or whatever. So basically, the problem that Biden has is that he wants the publicity of being with the British royals, but he doesn't want to have to think he will tolerate the Brits. I think that Sunak should cut back on that visit and give him nothing out of it, because I'm just sick of us being humiliated by this awful man.
Well, just a thought from you on this, Scarlett. I mean, a lot of people would say Ursula von der Leyen, not perhaps most famous for her role in Germany in the defence ministry, but actually more as her role as president of the European Commission, which is perhaps, and that's my point about Brexit, that this is just more of an American sort of leaning towards Europe.
Well, I mean, I think he's doing anybody but Ben Wallace. But when David says, you know, Rishi Sunak should grow a backbone, I mean, actually, the problem is Joe Biden and the United States are more important than us, and we need them a lot more than they need us. That is Rishi Sunak's problem.
OK. Want to just finish with you in 20 seconds? A tip for Wimbledon?
Alcaraz. I mean, anybody who even remotely likes tennis should watch Alcaraz on the TV. He is the most wonderful tennis player. He's all over the place. Every shot he does, he wants to win. He never, ever gives up. He is absolutely amazing. And he's just 20.
Just 20.
He's just turned 20. He's going to be with us, one hopes, playing that sort of tennis.
But, you know, when you look back on the history books, a lot of these guys did their best stuff at just 20. Bjorn Borg, I think, was just 20 when he was winning Wimbledon.
But look at Federer, the wonderful Federer and Nadal. I mean, those two are brilliant. But Alcaraz is justifiably will come next.
Looking at Federer. Princess of Wales is looking at Federer and all of that.
I know! Princess of Wales and the King of Tennis.
Scarlett and David, thank you both very much
really
indeed.
Appreciate
Thanks
it.
for bringing you up to date with some more of today's main news stories. Prisons in England and Wales are reaching breaking point. The chairman of the Justice Committee has warned. Sir Bob Neill said that there are real issues with prison officer recruitment, retention, low morale, and he warns of a potential powder keg.
The government's expansion of free childcare for working parents in England may not be delivered universally due to capacity issues, councils have warned. Analysis by the Local Government Association suggests 88% of councils are concerned that nursery closures this year will undermine the policy.
The Prince and Princess of Wales have surprised NHS staff by dropping in for a tea party at a London hospital. The royal couple met with guests including Nye Thomas, the first baby born in the NHS, named after its founder, Aneurin Bevan.
Now, we're celebrating the NHS's birthday today, aren't we? And lots of you have been getting in touch with your stories and reflections on some of the incredible achievements of the health service. And we're going to spend a bit of time really thinking about that now.
With us in studio now, John Hoyle. John's wife, Emily, tragically passed away following a battle with cystic fibrosis.
And the excellent care provided by the NHS extended her life by 10 years and allowed her to start a family. And John, first of all, we just want to celebrate Emily, really, and the amazing life that she had, largely thanks to the NHS.
Yeah, exactly. If it wasn't for 2 amazing lung transplants, we wouldn't have had 10 more years of Emily. We wouldn't have our son, Henry. She wouldn't have been able to get a world record climbing a volcano in South America. So, of course, I and our family are huge supporters of the NHS. The
reason that we invited you in, we should say to anyone watching, Emily was my flatmate at university, so we've been friends for 20 years. And the first time I met Emily, she there we are at our friend's wedding, she told me she had cystic fibrosis, and this was it's an inherited disease that people are born with. I think it's the largest hereditary disease in this country. And from the moment she was a baby, effectively, she's had to have long-term treatment to help her survive. Just explain to us how Emily managed that, because my impressions of Emily were always that she wasn't defined by her illness. The NHS made her life possible.
Yeah. Well, I mean, she had a huge drugs regime in the latter years, 6 hours of intravenous drugs a day, but even from when you knew her, hundreds of pills a day. And I think, I mean, lots of people have been talking about the NHS's challenges today. She became expert in gaming the NHS. She knew her way around that system so well that doctors were sort of lived in fear of her, and that's amazing on her part for being able to use what is a brilliant system when it succeeds for her own benefit.
It's always also a tribute to you, because she lived with cystic fibrosis, so did you. and you guys were married for 15 years, and you reckon out of those 15, four of her years and your years were spent in hospital?
Yes, I mean, as kind of inpatients, and we didn't obviously know we were signing up to sort of a weird hospital prison sentence, but of course, and that excludes, you know, the certainly monthly but often weekly visits when she was an outpatient. So the NHS has been a huge part of our life, which is why I've got such an affinity for the staff in particular. And we've got, you know, since she's died, actually, that's left a bit of a hole, not having those relationships with all those amazing people who supported us.
Because Emily passed away at the age of 38 last November, and, you know, we both feel this hugely and miss her every day, but are so grateful that we got that extra time, because when I first met her, she told me that she was going to live to 30 or perhaps even younger. And it was the staff that you talk about, those people that were nursing her at her lowest point. I mean, tell us about those transplants and the incredible story of what she survived there.
Yeah, 2 brutal lung transplants, double lung transplants in 2012 and 2016.
Has anyone else ever had 2?
There are now a few,
Okay.
and in fact, you know, some of our friends, including Amanda, who climbed the mountain with her, and Sophie, who sadly is struggling not just with lungs but also with bowel issues now, have benefited in a similar way to Emily. But I think what makes her truly extraordinary is the self-discipline and, of course, the record in the middle of it. Not many people have been able to achieve that, and she was a force of nature.
Yeah, she really was. And Eamonn was able to help a little dream come true for her at the end last year, and she was a huge Strictly fan. And this just always sticks in my mind, because you'd managed to get her access to go to one of the live shows. And she was in hospital. She'd been in hospital for a really long time at the Harefield. This was just before she was moved to a hospice. But all the staff made that possible for her to go, because it was a huge undertaking. They were all singing the theme tune of da, 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 up and down the wards.
But the thing that got me, John, was that she was well up for that visit, and anybody that I knew on Strictly, you know, they engaged with her and they thought everything was great. But then Isabel would tell me she's going really downhill really quickly after that. It was as if she'd held herself back. That was a big thing for her, and then downhill.
Yeah, she was in a hospice a week after Strictly, so it really was an amazing gift. We're so grateful for that. We were treated like, you know, like our own little celebrities on that night, which was wonderful, and an amazing bucket list thing for her to get to do.
Just then, finally, I suppose, you know, obviously our thoughts very much about Emily, but what are your feelings when you think about the NHS and its future? There's lots of people bashing the NHS, and, you know, there are lots of questions about whether or not it's sustainable.
Yeah.
You know, what's your kind of overview of it all?
Well, we come from a family where my mother-in-law, who you've met, and our aunt were nurses at St Bart's, as were my mother-in-law's parents. They met at St Bart's, so there's a huge sort of historical affinity for the NHS. And then, of course, we've benefited not just through lung transplants, but also, you know, fertility. And it is a system that, when it works, is formidable. And I've spent, you know, I've lived in a lot of other countries, and there are few countries that can compare to what we have. So I understand that it's creaking, and we've had sort of ringside seats, because Emily's godmother was Dame Sally Davis, who was Chris Whitty's predecessor. And I've heard from her the challenges of keeping this enormous organisation going in a time where the UK is not as rich as it has been historically. And I'm just grateful we have what we do have, although I do acknowledge it's under more pressure than it ever has been before.
Graham has got in touch with us today, and he said, I had NHS treatment for cancer. The staff were amazing. The system wasn't perfect, but the NHS saved my life. My national insurance payments will never cover the cost of the treatment that I had. If people want to keep demanding more from the NHS, then they have to be prepared to pay for it. The system needs streamlining, says Graham.
Yeah, lots of views and experiences, but I think it is important on this birthday to celebrate all the wonderful achievements in the NHS. Thank you so much for telling us Emily's story, John.
Yeah, we celebrate Emily's life and John's whole role in that. Thank you very much indeed.
Stay with us. Coming up, we're going to be speaking to the Shadow Health Secretary, Wes Streeting. Got your time to send in any questions you want us to put to him. He, of course, talking about the 75th anniversary of the NHS. Would it be any better under Labour? Stay with us for that in just a moment.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard. We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often there will be difficult stories, stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed. So I guess they've always been quite woke. That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views, and often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamonn and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel. The Health Secretary rejects an overhaul of the NHS on its 75th anniversary, as experts warn it's in critical condition.
Good morning, it's 9 o'clock on Wednesday the 5th of July. This is Breakfast on GB News with Eamonn, Holmes and Isabel Webster.
And leading our news on this Wednesday morning, evolution, not revolution, is the message from the Health Secretary as the NHS celebrates 75 years in existence today. But it comes as the country's 3 main health think tanks warn that without more investment, it won't reach its 100th anniversary.
Boris Johnson's Partygate investigator, Sir Bernard Jenkin, is facing a police probe into claims he broke lockdown rules. Scotland Yard's looking into a birthday drinks held for the Conservative MP's wife in Parliament in December 2020.
Schools in England are facing closure today as teachers walk out over pay and conditions, as well as lessons, end-of-term events like school trips, plays and sports days are predicted to face widespread disruption.
King Charles will be presented with Scotland's crown jewels at a ceremony to mark his coronation today and will be live from the procession in Edinburgh.
Join me from Scotland's capital city on this historic day where King Charles III will be presented with Scotland's crown jewels.
Well, that looks a calm day in Edinburgh. Bit of a blue sky behind there, no wind or anything else like that.
That's the forecast.
What?
That's the professional forecast.
What will it be like with your weather update?
It's been a cool and in some places wet start to the month, but the heat returns in some places by the end of the week. I'll have the full details in the forecast coming up.
OK, so Steve Barclay today saying on the 75th anniversary of the Health Service, it's evolution, not revolution. Writing in the Times, he says he's heralded the NHS as a source of national pride. And he said he was committed to the model of free at the point of use.
But it comes as the country's three main health think tanks warn that the NHS won't make its 100th birthday without support. And this is just a day after former Health Secretary Sajid Javid called for a royal commission.
Now, earlier on the programme, we had the Health Minister, Maria Caulfield, who was also trained as a nurse. And she told us that it's about what you do with the money, not how much you spend.
My experience, it isn't just about how much money you spend on the NHS, it's how you spend it. So I don't want to be too party political, but when Labour in government, they spent a huge amount of money trying to roll out an IT system, spent billions on that never saw the light of day. And the money that we're spending now, whether it's investing in staff, you know, reintroducing the apprenticeship routes for many healthcare workers, whether it's about improving the buildings. I know from my experience, I've worked on long, old Nightingale wards. They're very difficult to nurse in. There's no privacy for patients, there's no space to be able to do procedures. And making those changes, making our buildings, our hospitals, our diagnostic centres fit for the future, that makes a difference for the staff, it helps with retention, but it also improves the experience for patients. And I think it's what you do with the money, not how much you spend.
Well, our Deputy Political Editor Tom Harwood is live for us now at the country's oldest hospital, that is St Bart's in London. Good morning to you, Tom. I suppose a mixed day, really, of celebrations, but also serious reflections on the future of the NHS.
Absolutely. There's been a long and varied history of healthcare in this country. It was in the year 1123 when St Bart's was first founded, although it was nationalised as a hospital 75 years ago today. And ever since that moment in 1948, this country has had political debates around healthcare, whereas other European countries, for example, leave it in a less political sphere. It does mean that sometimes the NHS can become a political football. It's very often a message at election time, how many hours or days or weeks we have to quote-unquote save the NHS. But what we've seen in the last 15 or so years is a huge amount of extra money going into the service. Compared to 2008/9, this year funding is 50% up. In real terms, tens upon tens upon tens of £1 billion more into the service. But the criticism from many is that, are we seeing value for that money, for those extra billions of taxpayer pounds that have been put in to the service? Clearly, waiting lists are a big issue, still growing, and although the service is now getting more money than the OECD average healthcare system does, outcomes are not matching many of our comparable European countries. And that's why we're hearing some interventions from, for example, the former Health Secretary Sajid Javid, who's calling for this royal commission to compare how the NHS is run with other universal healthcare systems. Whilst the UK was one of the first countries in the world to deliver universal healthcare, albeit after Bavaria and Norway, or not Bavaria, Prussia, I should say, and Norway, we were one of the first to deliver that universal service. But since then, many other countries, particularly European countries, have introduced their own version of universal healthcare. Sajid Javid is suggesting that we look at how some of those systems, from France to the Netherlands to Switzerland, for example, deliver their healthcare, although the government is saying that it really doesn't want to look at any of these big changes at the moment.
With that, thank you very much indeed.
OK, with the time at 8 minutes past 9, let's get up to date with what else is happening news-wise.
Schools in England face closure today as teachers walk out again over paying conditions, as well as lessons. End-of-term events like school trips and sports days are predicted to face disruption. Members of the National Education Union will also walk out this Friday. Prisons in England and Wales are reaching breaking point, the chairman of the Justice Committee has warned. Sir Bob Neal said that there are real issues with prison officer recruitment, retention and low morale, warning of a potential powder keg. And the Wimbledon tennis tournament is continuing. Fans should expect sunnier spells and fewer showers, luckily, after that heavy rain on the tournament's second day stopped play on the outside courts yesterday. But overall, today we'll see scattered bouts of rain across southeast England, and it should feel slightly warmer for many.
And the weather so far looks good in Edinburgh, where the coronation of King Charles III with a ceremony at St Giles Cathedral will take place.
Yes, the monarch is to be presented with the crown jewels of Scotland, and the proceedings will include a new sword named after the late Queen.
Let's speak to our royal correspondent Cameron Walker, live from the city itself. Cameron, good morning to you.
Good morning, Eamonn. The sun is certainly shining here in Edinburgh, unlike yesterday's washouts for the Royal Garden Party. But this is a historic day because it's the first time since 1953 where the Queen was presented with a similar service with the honours of Scotland. And this time, of course, it's King Charles III's turn. The barriers are out. The crowds are expected to gather along the Royal Mile, lining the route from Edinburgh Castle to St Giles's Cathedral and right the way down to the Palace of Holyrood House. 700 members of the armed forces are expected to join the procession from the Royal Navy, Royal Air Force and British Army. There's also going to be a people's procession as well, all led by a Shetland pony who is the mascot of the Royal Regiment of Scotland. The honours of Scotland is going to be presented to His Majesty the King in a service of thanksgiving at St Giles's Cathedral, the oldest set of crown jewels in the British Isles. But there is a new addition, a new sword named after Queen Elizabeth II. Dame Catherine Granger, the former Olympic gold medalist, will be carrying the sword as part of that service of thanksgiving. We can expect the King, the Queen later, and the Prince and Princess of Wales, who are known as the Duke and Duchess of Rothesay in Scotland. So make sure you keep tuning in to GB News all afternoon.
Thank you, Cameron. Keep us posted. Let's now cross to the Shadow Health Secretary. We've got Wes Streeting here on this 75th anniversary of the National Health Service. Wes, I wonder how you feel on a day like this, such a significant day. I suppose there's underlying joy, but you must be troubled by the state the NHS is in. Good morning.
Good morning. I think that's exactly right. I don't begrudge NHS staff, past and present, celebrating the enormous contribution they make and the NHS has made to our country over the last 75 years. What I do begrudge is the Prime Minister and other government ministers out celebrating, because when you look at the state the NHS is in today, objectively the worst crisis in its history, the shortest, well, the lowest patient satisfaction ever and the highest waiting lists on record, that's really not something I think this government should be celebrating. If anything, they should be apologising to the country for the state that they've left the NHS in. And I think lots of people, myself included, feel deeply anxious about the NHS's future. I'll be along to the Abbey later this morning, Westminster Abbey, with the Prime Minister and other dignitaries. But I think the NHS needs more than prayers, it needs a plan, and that's what Labour's offering at the next general election.
To know what you think of your most successful former leader, Tony Blair's plan. He says there needs to be brave political leadership and that patients should be allowed to pay to be treated more quickly and to use the health service cash to pay for private treatment that's not normally funded by the taxpayer. Is that something that you would welcome?
Well, I'm a big fan of Tony Blair and his record as Prime Minister on the NHS, the shortest waiting times and the highest patient satisfaction in history. But where I disagree with Tony is that I don't support user charging, and actually I'm deeply angry about the two-tier system we have in our country today, where those who can afford it are paying to go private and those who can't afford it are being left behind. My answer would be, in the short term, where there is spare capacity in the private sector, we should be paying for it on NHS terms so that people who can't afford it are getting it free at the point of use. That would be my answer. I've got no objection to using private sector capacity to get NHS waiting lists down faster. Tony did that very effectively when he was Prime Minister. But what I would do is have the NHS pay for it on NHS terms so that people don't have to worry about the price tag. Because certainly when I went through kidney cancer a couple of years ago, I had so many things to worry about. The one thing I didn't have to worry about was the bill. And it's that central principle of an NHS that's free at the point of use that I want to defend for the next 75 years, and I would worry about a slippery slope otherwise.
So when you hear Health Secretary Steve Barclay today talking about evolution, not revolution, with all of this, do you agree with that analysis in any way, or what do you see as the biggest problem the NHS is facing? I often look at the treatment is all very good. It's waiting to get the treatment. So therefore, I would think waiting lists in general, just getting the waiting lists down must be a priority.
Yeah, I do disagree with Steve Barclay. I don't think he understands the scale of the challenge. And even if the NHS weren't in its worst crisis in history, even if the public finances weren't a car crash, which they are, we would still need to change the way the NHS works to make it fit for the future, because we've got this revolution in medical science and technology which offers our country huge opportunities. We are also living longer, and with older age comes more chronic disease, which not only threatens to overwhelm health services if they don't change and modernise, it also means we might be living longer, but we'll be living miserably for longer, and nobody wants that. I don't know about you, but I don't want to just look back on a life well lived. I want to live life to the full until the very end. And so that does require change. And when I've been looking at other countries and why they perform better than the NHS, you look at where the money goes. Because we underinvest in primary care, we end up not being able to get a GP appointment, which costs 40 quid. So we go to A&E, which costs 360 quid, worse for the patient and more expensive for the taxpayer. So we've got to shift the focus of healthcare out of hospital into local services, neighbourhood services, primary care, general practice, services in people's homes. We've got to make the NHS a digitally driven service with the latest technology rather than the creaking IT systems, and we've got to focus on improving our own health through better diet, physical activity, and that is a big cross-government societal challenge, not just one for the NHS. We do all those things, we'll have an NHS that's there for us where we need it, free at the point of use for the next 75 years.
There will be a lot of people watching, not just you today, but also the Health Secretary coming out talking, as Eamonn says, evolution, not revolution, saying this is a missed opportunity, and actually politicians aren't the right people to be entrusted with the future of the NHS, because actually when we talk about the models from overseas, do we really always have to come back to free at the point of use? There are very effective and efficient and equitable services around the world that we could look at, and politicians just don't seem to want to do that because, of course, they have to get re-elected.
Well, I'm not afraid of saying things that I think might be unpopular with people in my own party or elsewhere. I mean, what I've said about using the private sector to bring down NHS waiting lists does not earn me lots of plaudits on social media. But I genuinely think that an NHS that's free at the point of use, I think, is the fairest way of funding the health service and the fairest way of delivering the health service. I also think in this world that we're now living in of genomics, big data, machine learning, the way in which technology is going to change the way our health service works, there are big advantages to the NHS model that we have in terms of procurement, in terms of making the NHS the best system in the world to trial new treatments and new technologies. I think there are just huge advantages there, but they are untapped advantages. That's what I would want to change. But I would honestly think that if we moved away from an NHS that's free at the point of use, I think we would all live to regret it. I think we would bake unfairness into the system and inefficiency. If I thought it was the right thing to do, I would go for it, even if I thought it was unpopular. I'm a reformer in politics. I want to change things, but I genuinely don't think it's the right answer.
West Trading, thank you very much indeed. Keep well.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate it. Thank you very much indeed.
Cheers, thank you very much.
Right, 9:15 is the time. At 9:30 it is...
Britain's Newsroom with Andrew and Bev. What have you got for us? Good morning.
Good morning, both. Morning. Well, obviously, the NHS 75th anniversary, as you were talking about then, we're going to be looking at that a little bit more and having some debates around the future of the health service. And, of course, big day in Scotland. We've got the Scottish coronation. Not its official title, but that's what, obviously, we all know it as.
The oldest crown jewel. One of the oldest crown jewels in Europe is the Crown of Scotland, which is really interesting. Also, we're going to get the latest on that court case over the expansion of the ultra-low emission zone, which is hugely unpopular. And we'll be talking up our campaign to save cash.
Which is flying.
Yeah.
I'm so proud of this channel for doing that. I think it affects so many people in so many fundamental ways.
I think we're nearly 90,000 signatures already.
Yeah.
Fabulous. Well, we look forward to the show. Thanks very much. Have a good one.
And a good chat with the singer Natalie Rushdie. Next, Isabel is going off to watch a performance of her own. Her young son, William, performing on stage, and she's going to be a good mummy and go and watch him. I'll be here after the break, Natalie and I, and we're talking about a new charity single honouring the life and legacy of Dame Deborah Jones, Bowel Babe. Have a good...
First and foremost, I'm a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamonn.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us. From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamonn and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com. You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
Now, we've got a good story to end on the programme today. A charity single honouring the life of Dame Deborah James has been released. The journalist and campaigner passed away just 40 years old from bowel cancer. That was a year ago, in June last year. The song is called Tell Me It's Not True, from Blood Brothers, and it was originally performed by her friend, who joins me now in the studio, Natalie Rushdie, at Deborah's funeral. Before Natalie and I chat, have a listen.
It's just a story, something on the news. Tell me it is, and morning will come soon, and morning will come soon.
Well, that little extract there, and 100% of anything raised, proceeds from that will go to the Bowel Babe Fund for Cancer Research and UK. And the voice you were hearing, Natalie Rushdie, who I'm delighted to say is with me now. Lovely to see you.
Thank you so much for having me.
And you've literally been out shaking your collecting tin this week. In memory, not just of this cause, but for your friend. Deborah was your friend.
I think the most important thing is that we raise awareness and as much funds as we can for Deborah and the Bowel Babe Fund, who are supporting her work and continuing her legacy.
Yeah, but I could see, I know you've been around, I've been following you on Instagram, and I know you've been around a lot of the country, and I could see a picture of you and Prince William there in all of that, and you met his wife yesterday at Wimbledon, so tell us all.
So I was invited to Wimbledon, to the Royal Box, for the first time. It was actually the first experience I've had at Wimbledon, even though I've applied for the ballot every single year. So I thought, wow, this is the experience to have. And I introduced myself to Kate, Princess of Wales, rather, and said thank you so much for your support and for Prince William's support as well. And she said it was amazing that what we were doing, and it was really important to Prince William to get behind it. So I thought I was really touched that, you know, obviously he gave her damehood, and for them to continue her legacy and continue their support was just so important.
It is very, very important. Now, tell me the song itself, why that song?
Yeah, so that song, Deborah absolutely adored musicals, and when she had sepsis, she said, I'm going to go and see if I can go to watch Blood Brothers, which is the finale song, and she lasted sort of 5 minutes, and then she said, oh, I'll leave after 10 minutes, and then 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, and Tell Me It's Not True is the final song of Blood Brothers, and she said immediately, that is my funeral song. And then we both had sepsis at the same time, and last year we promised ourselves that if we made it, both of us made it through sepsis, we would go to Ascot together, and that's where she asked me, will you sing at my funeral?
No. I was also lucky enough to bump into both of you at Ascot last year.
Yeah.
And although she looked well, she was thin, she was quite frail, and she didn't last long after that, really.
That was her last outing before she passed away, about, I think it was a week later. And even though she was so unwell, she was so still full of life, and she had that Deborah sparkle in her eyes. And she was such a wonderful friend that she was telling me what she was working on and what campaign, and she just didn't want anyone else to experience what she had. And I just thought, how is someone that is so unwell still campaigning that there's not another Deborah?
Well, there's not another you. She's lucky she had a friend like you who is, you know, still campaigning on her behalf. What do you need people to do, or how do they get their hands on the song?
Yes, so we need people to download, stream, share, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, get everyone behind it. And please, if you're on Spotify, you can download an Apple, iTunes, all of them. So whatever you can do is greatly appreciated.
Yeah. And the health message that goes out on the back of this for Bowel Babe?
Check your poo.
Yeah. OK. Natalie, absolute pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Good luck to you with all of that. And the song, Tell Me It's Not True, special to Deborah James, very special to you.
Thank you.
Keep on with the good work. Thank you. Thank you very much indeed. Natalie Rushdie there. That's it from Breakfast for this Wednesday morning. We'll be back tomorrow, Thursday from 6. Up next, Bev and Andrew, Britain's Newsroom. Have yourselves a good day.
Good morning. It was a busy day in court yesterday. Sadiq Khan is under the spotlight for his ULEZ expansions. We're going to have Howard Cox from Fairfield UK. He was in court yesterday. He's going to tell us what happened.
And he'll also get the latest on the supermarkets that are ripping off with petrol. One Tesco supermarket charging 15p a litre more than another Tesco supermarket 40 miles away. Also, we're talking about dementia because Fiona Phillips has given a very brave interview to the Daily Mirror. She's the TV presenter revealing that she was diagnosed with Alzheimer's 18 months ago.
Yeah.
Only 60, far too young.
Very young.
And of course it killed her parents.
Awful. And we're going to have some beautiful pictures from Scotland. Cameron Walker is there with the King and Queen this morning. They've got a big celebratory week, Hollywood Week, of course, up in Scotland. So we're going to be talking to Cameron up there.
It's the Scottish coronation, and we'll be there, of course.
See you in a minute.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard. We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often they will be difficult stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison? I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed. So I guess they've always been quite woke. That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel. Britain's news channel.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views, and often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is two new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamonn and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Good morning, it's 9:30 on Wednesday, the 5th of July. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner.
A very happy birthday to the NHS. Today marks 75 years of our National Health Service.